Good afternoon. This is the Kentucky Public Service Commission. My name is Michael Schmidt. I'm chairman of the commission, and attending this meeting virtually today, in addition to myself, are Vice Chairman Kent Chandler and Dr. Talina Matthews. This hearing is being conducted live for the most part, except for the two other commissioners who are here by way of video conferencing. A live or a log will be prepared by our reporter, Ms. Sackery, which will constitute the official record of the proceeding today. And the video will also be made, and this proceeding is being streamed live over the internet. The purpose of the hearing today is to take evidence in case number 2020-00141, application of Hyden-Leslie County Water District for an alternative rate adjustment. There are no intervenors in the case, so at this time would counsel for Hyden-Leslie County Water District please identify himself, his client for the record, and those who are with him here this morning or this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Gerald Butcher. I'm appearing on behalf of Hyden-Leslie County Water District. I'm with the firm Stoll Keenan Ogden, PLLC. My address is 300 West Vine Street, Suite 2100, Lexington, Kentucky, 40507. We have two witnesses today, Mr. L.J. Turner, who's in the courtroom, and Mr. Alan Belines, who will be appearing by video conference.
Okay.
Also in the hearing room today, I believe under subpoena to appear, are Commissioners Timothy Helton, William Todd Horton, and Dwight Lewis. We also have former Commissioner Augustus Roberts. And also subpoena to appear is Mr. Mike Maggard of the engineering firm Sisler Maggard Engineering, who is a consultant to Hyden-Leslie County Water District.
Thank you. All right, and for staff?
Brittany Koenig for staff.
Thank you. All right, I suppose as we start today, this hearing was ordered by the commission, and although we haven't discussed it, Ms. Koenig, do you intend to go first and call witnesses, other than perhaps the two? Mr. Butcher, you would introduce yours and permit cross, and then you'd get an opportunity to redirect or however it works out.
Yes, sir. We had discussed it. The direct examination that I have for my two witnesses will be very brief. So if we could go first, then I would just tender them over, and then the other witnesses would...
All right. Well, you go first and present your witnesses, after which Ms. Koenig can cross, the commissioners can ask questions, and if there's an issue, then you redirect if you choose. And on the witnesses that Ms. Koenig calls, would probably be more efficient. She asks questions, the commissioners then ask questions, and you'd have a chance then to redirect and clear, or direct and clear up anything that you might want.
Yes, sir, that would be fine.
All right. All right, let's get started then. Mr. Butcher, would you call your first witness?
Yes, before we begin, Your Honor, Ms. Koenig and I had discussed there was a third witness, Mr. Jason Pinnell. He was involved in preparing the Exhibit Q to the Water District's application. It addressed non-recurring charges, and we had agreed to stipulate his testimony. And if I could just read this in the record real quick, just what we agreed to stipulate.
Is that you've agreed to stipulate?
We have no objections to the stipulation of what's already in the
Go ahead and, now you have a written stipulation. You know the log, Ms. Sackery's log won't be verbatim. So if you have testimony, maybe you ought, if it's written, you could go ahead and do it orally, but file it if you'd like.
Well, let me suggest a shortcut, which would be, I have it written, but not in the form that would be suitable for filing. Since we're in agreement, I'll just submit the stipulation to Ms. Koenig and then file it after the hearing.
That'd be fine.
Okay. With that, Your Honor, I would call Mr. L.J. Turner to take the stand.
Mr. Turner, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. I would like to say, I guess, that the area in which you're testifying, Mr. Turner, has been cleansed and disinfected. And after your testimony is complete, I think Ms. Music or someone will come in, or Ms. Stratton, and clean or disinfect the area for the next witness is called, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, can I remove the mask?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Turner.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and address?
LJ Turner, Larry J. Turner, my home address, 184 Howard Lane, Hyden, Kentucky. Business address, 356 Wendover Road, Hyden, Kentucky.
And who is your employer?
Hyden-Leslie County Water District,
And what is your position with Hyden-Leslie?
general manager,
And how long have you held that position?
3 years.
Okay. And what are your duties as general manager?
Just general oversight of operations, administrative oversight as well.
And prior to becoming manager of Hyden-Leslie, where were you employed?
Knott County Water and Sewer District.
And what was your position there?
I was general manager there as well.
Okay. And how long were you general manager there?
Approximately 3 years.
Okay. And prior to that, what was your employment history?
Well, at Knott County Water and Sewer, I held a general manager position. Prior to that, I was the interim manager, and prior to that, I was the water treatment plant supervisor.
When you were first hired as general manager of Hyden-Leslie, was that your first time of your employment with Hyden-Leslie?
No, it was not. I worked 12 years with Hyden-Leslie as a water treatment plant operator.
Would you briefly describe your professional training or certifications?
The training was more or less on the job. I do hold a Class 4 drinking water treatment plant certification.
Briefly, what was your role in the preparation of Hyden-Leslie's application for rate adjustment?
Well, myself, as well as Ellen Valines, we prepared the documents. I supplied most of the data for Alan, which did our cost of service study.
And Mr. Valliance is a rate consultant with the Kentucky Rural Water Association?
That's correct.
And just, the district commissioned the Kentucky Rural Water Association to prepare a study?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you prepare responses to the PSC's order of June 18th, 2020, and to the commission staff's second request for information for which you are identified as a witness?
Yes.
And do you have any revisions to make to those responses that you prepared and sponsored?
Only the revisions that we were invited to make.
So when you say invited, what, are you referring to comments in the commission staff report, requesting additional information or stating that additional information is needed?
That's correct.
If you were asked today the same questions that you responded to, would your answers to those questions be the same?
Yes.
Okay, I want to just go through a couple of questions regarding, is it correct that the district has two areas where it wants to go ahead and have the commission consider potential revisions to the commission staff report?
Yes.
Okay, and let's go ahead and discuss those very briefly. Is it correct that the district used calendar year 2018 as its test period?
Yes.
How many employees did the district have at the beginning of 2018?
11.
Are you sure it was
Oh,
11?
I'm sorry, 2000, I'm sorry, it was 12. I'm sorry.
Okay. During 2018, did one of you, our rehearsal didn't go well. During 2018, did one of your employees leave the employment of the water district?
Yes.
What was that employee's position?
Distribution operator.
Okay, and after that distribution operator left, did the district fill that position?
Yes, we did.
You filled it immediately?
No, I'm sorry, we filled it in 2020.
Okay, so it remained vacant for at least a portion of 2018
That's
and all of
correct.
2019?
That's correct.
When did the district actually fill the position? What month?
I think it was March of 20.
Okay. Now, prior to the issuance of the PSC staff report, did the district advise the staff that the vacant position had been filled?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
Okay, well, let me rephrase that. To your knowledge, when the commission staff issued its report in September, was it aware that the vacant position had been filled in March?
No.
Okay. Now, when the commission staff issued its report, do you recall how it calculated the employee and salaries wage expense?
I do, yes.
Okay. Did the district use 11 employees as the basis for calculating that expense?
We did,
And did the staff also use 11 employees?
yes.
Okay. And in that staff report, did the staff express some concern that the position may have been filled and that it was not aware of the vacancy being filled?
They did.
And did it suggest that the district provide that information if it had it in its response to the staff report?
Yes,
Okay, and did the district do so?
we did in a response, yes.
Okay. Now, I want to go ahead, if I can do this, and I'm going to show, in response to the commission staff report, did the district attach its calculations as to the annual cost associated with that 12th employee, the one
Yes.
who had been hired in March?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you, I'm hoping I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what was attached as Exhibit A to the district's response to the commission staff report and ask if you recognize it.
Yes, that's the employee that we added's wages along with the benefits as well.
And so you're familiar with this exhibit?
Yes,
Okay, and does this exhibit detail the district's expenses related to that 12th employee?
yes,
Okay, does it include employee wages?
it does.
Does it also include employer taxes?
Yes,
And does it also include health insurance costs that the district incurs?
yes.
Okay, in the calculation of the health insurance cost, has the district made some type of adjustment to reflect the Public Service Commission's rules limiting the amount of employer contribution for rate-making purposes for health insurance and premiums for employees?
Yes.
And is that, was that limited to 66% of the employees, the cost for that employee's health insurance coverage?
Yes.
I take it that employee has family health insurance
That's
coverage?
correct.
What is the total annual expense that the district incurs to employ that 12th employee?
The $50,353.17.
Okay, and to your knowledge, is this expense included in the PSC staff's recommended revenue requirement?
It is not.
Okay. And is it the district's position that the revenue requirement that was recommended by commission staff should be increased to reflect this cost?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move on to the second issue. Is it correct that the PSC staff recommended that employees' salary and wages expense be reduced by $9,949 related to lump sum payments that the district made to employees for unused vacation leave during the test period?
Yes.
And did the PSC staff base its recommendation on the lack of supporting evidence that a policy on vacation leave existed?
They did.
Did it also cite to a failure to demonstrate that the payments were reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Did the district omit from its response to the PSC staff's second request for information a copy of this policy?
Yes.
And was that omission the result of an error on the part of the district's counsel in assembling the application?
I think so.
Okay. So did the district provide a copy of the policy as Exhibit B to its response to the commission staff report?
Yes.
Okay, could you very briefly describe what the district's vacation policy is related to lump sum payments?
The policy is if an employee has unused vacation time, they can request to be paid out for that rather than take it when they don't necessarily want it. And it's a benefit kind of for the employee as well as the district. With a small staff, if that person chooses to work rather than take off, we're less likely to have to pay overtime during that period. As well as it's a benefit for that employee.
So does that policy of making those lump sum payments increase the operational efficiency of the district?
Yes.
And it provides at least some financial benefit also?
Yes.
Is it the district's position that the commission should allow the recovery of that $9,949 associated with those lump sum payments to be recovered through the district's rates?
Yes.
Okay, with the exception of those two items, does the district have, on which the district presented some additional evidence, does the district agree with the commission staff's findings?
Yes.
What is the district's position regarding whether the rate increase should be implemented immediately or in two phases?
The Water District had moved forward with a two-phase approach to try to lessen the blow to some of the customers as far as rate shock is concerned. It was our main priority that we had enough money to cash flow during phase one. So it was the preference of the utility to do two phases, but are not opposed to anything, to a single increase. But it was just a preference.
Has the district received a lot of criticism or at least expressions of concern from the public regarding the size of the increase?
Yes.
You were a witness in PSC case number 2019-00412. Is that correct?
I assume that's the correct case.
That was the proceeding that dealt with the Water District's request for authorization to enter into a short-term loan with the Kentucky Rural Water Finance Corporation and a much longer loan for permanent financing with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the commission in that case authorized the short-term loan, but denied, at least for the time being, authorization for the loan with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is it also correct that the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, in offering to make the loan, provided or placed certain conditions that the district had to meet regarding its rates?
Yes, they did.
And was that condition generally that the rates had to be sufficient not only to support the debt service payments of the district's existing loans, but also the debt service payments for the KIA loan?
That's correct.
Okay. Has the district been keeping the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority abreast of what's going on in this proceeding?
Yes, we have.
And has the district had any contact with KIA regarding the PSC staff report and the staff's recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and reference to you a document that was filed yesterday in the record of this case. But do you recognize this document?
I do.
And can you describe it for us?
It's a letter from Ms. Bribwell that just basically says that the PSC rates that were proposed will be sufficient to satisfy KIA.
And Ms. Bridwell is the Deputy Executive Director of KIA?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Was this the last condition that the district needed to satisfy, aside from getting PSC authorization, in order to proceed to enter into an assistance agreement with
Yes.
KIA?
Their conditions that we met the RD standards, but they waived those because what they were wanting from the RD was the rates, so we were able to get those through an alternative rate filing, or this case, so yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for you, except to ask, is there anything else that you'd like to, any comments that you'd like to, or statements that you'd like to make to the commission regarding the proposed rates?
I don't think so.
Okay. With that, Your Honor, I tender the witness for cross-examination.
Ms. Coney, you may ask.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Turner.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. As Mr. Wucher referenced, you're a part of the 2019 412 case, and you testified in the 2019 41 case as well. And this matter is kind of a culmination that started with the 1941 investigation. So I hope to kind of tie up some loose ends from all of those cases and the different issues that arose in the different cases. So, but I'm just going to start with what is the current financial condition of Hyden-Leslie District?
It's relatively unchanged. We're still operating in the red. We still have some cash available to us, but it's relatively the same. We've cut our expenses a little bit. Of course, we've not increased any revenue, but it's relatively unchanged.
Okay. Has the operational condition changed?
It has. The operational condition has continued to improve. Our water loss efforts, we're really proud of what we've done with water loss. Year to date, we're 21%.
Okay.
And that's with, we've not had any capital expenditures. We've not had any grants, any loans. We've done this all on a limited budget and a lot of effort.
Okay.
So we're very proud of that.
Okay. And you explained at the 412 hearing that you think that that's attributed to the drawdown system that you put in place, or tank drawdown?
Well, it's kind of a small part of it. What I was trying to get across there, that was one aspect of what we do as far as water loss. By doing those drawdowns, that just gave us one goal or one target, so to speak. Our main indicators to see where we are on a daily basis are those tank drawdowns as well as raw water totals to see what we pump for that day. To determine where you're going to go, you got to know where you're at. So that kind of tells us, that day or the last 24 hours, what we did or where we are.
Okay.
So it's kind of a small part of a bigger,
Okay.
a bigger scheme.
Can you elaborate then on what you've done
Sure.
to improve?
Sure. Well, we spent a lot more time doing leak detection, and I anticipated that whenever I came to Hyden-Leslie in 17. We have our repairs that we're doing are much better than what they were in the past as well. When you're operating on a limited budget, sometimes you cut corners. Sometimes corners are cut where they shouldn't be. In my opinion, the repair parts that we were using were not what was considered to be a permanent repair. So the parts were cheaper, but we're buying the best parts now that are permanent repairs. So we have a lot of new brakes, and we'll continue to until we do a huge rehab project. But when we do repairs now, we're not going back to them. And the first 2 years, we were going back and pulling those old parts out, putting better parts in, and we're not going back to those now. That made a huge difference. If we have a service line that has a pinhole and has 4 clamps on it, we pull it, we dig it up, replace the whole thing. We don't want any more Band-Aids on things. So those little moves have really helped us, and I attribute a lot to that. And staff. I feel like our staff at Hyden-Leslie feels like they're part of the solution. They've really bought into the program. And everybody's out looking for leaks. People get excited to find leaks and repair them because they can see where we're going. We pumped 1.1 million gallons a day, just about every day. And now we're pumping 850 to 890,000 gallons a day. So it's a huge decrease.
Have you written down these changes into a policy, or have they been part of a new water loss strategy?
We have a policy that's written that we feel like is sufficient. We may need to add some more detail, but we felt like everything was in it. it's so hard to put on paper all the different scenarios, so we kind of tried to generalize it.
You talked about, though, a new philosophy, having the goal. Are those things written down?
I think that the specific goals are not reflected in there, like for each drawdown or each demand factor on those drawdowns. I don't think specifically are in there.
Do you agree that maybe a written policy and do you discuss it with the board? Has that been the board of Commissioners, have they been a part of this new?
The policy?
New
Yeah,
policy.
they've reviewed the policy, yeah.
Okay. And so do you agree that a written policy would be appropriate here to keep it going and to make sure that it continues past?
We make it be more specific and just revisit it regularly, because that data changes according to customer counts and things of that nature. But it could probably be more specific, yes.
Okay. So as you stated, the district has accepted the staff report and suggested adjustments that you just explained. But with the adjustments, the proposed rate increase that you initially submitted was 70.18%. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
And then, okay, and then the staff report was 66.10%. And then, so with your adjustments that you request, it brings it to 70.13%. Is that correct?
Yes, I think.
So it's
I
not
think that's
that far apart.
the numbers. Right.
Okay. You've proposed the phased-in approach, and you've said that that's in response to the public comment?
Well, the district chose to do that, to propose a two-phased approach, to try to lessen the blow on the customers.
Okay. Will a phased-in approach allow the district to collect revenue adequate to cover its operation and maintenance expense and to pay its annual principal payments on long-term debt rather than use reserves?
That's correct. It will cash flow as well as satisfy the bond payments and interest as well.
Okay. Speaking of the public comment, have you reviewed the public comments for this case?
I have not.
Okay. Has there been any effort to educate the public about the rate increase or why there is the sizable rate increase that you're requesting?
There has been, there was an ad that was put in the paper about a rate increase early on that kind of explained some of the capital projects and things of that nature. But not other than that. I think there's probably plenty of data out there. Of course, there's links to all of our cases, and they can go view those on the commission website, but we've not sent out.
Are you in charge of your public relations department? Are you the public relations department?
I suppose.
Okay. Do you agree that, you have mentioned the public response to such a rate increase is why you've suggested the phased-in approach. But do you agree that it results in Hyden-Leslie receiving less revenue in the first year than it needs or can justify?
I'm sorry, can you?
Do you admit that the phased-in approach would leave you with less than what you need in that first year?
Well, the phase one would give us enough money to cash flow everything.
Okay. And your
the rest-
depreciation would not be fully funded?
That's correct. The depreciation would not be fully funded, but all the cash expenses would be.
Okay. Do you agree that educating the public might be very important, especially in a large rate increase?
I do.
And do you have any policies on that or any future plans for that?
I don't, but we do need to do a release, and we've discussed that briefly, maybe releasing a statement kind of summarizing what the rate is going to be, why the rates are what they're going to be, as well as some clarity on capital expenses and how we got here.
Okay. I'd like for you to refer to the application exhibit Q proposed non-recurring charges cost justification, and I've provided a copy there in front of you, one of the pages from that exhibit. And as Mr. Wutcher stated at the beginning of the hearing, Mr. Jason Pennell from the Kentucky Rural Water Association prepared the cost justification sheets, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Okay, but you agreed to respond to some of staff's inquiries on this subject.
Yeah, we'll try to
Okay.
get through them.
Okay. Let's see, so for the first part of the question, I want to refer generally to Exhibit Q, and I'm not sure that you have that in front of you, but let me just get to the heart of the question, and we'll see if you need a copy of it for reference or something, okay? So this is a question about how the labor expense was determined, and the average meter connection expense cost justification form, Section D, has the hourly rate of $64.18. And in Hyden-Leslie's response to Commission Order of June 18, 2020, Item 22B, the response explained that you used 2 employees to average the hourly cost. Can you explain what the basis for using 2 employees in the cost estimate was?
It generally takes 2 employees to do that job.
Okay. And is it a policy or?
No.
Okay. All right. And then in Section H of that same exhibit, which is what I'm going to reference or point you to Exhibit 1.
Would it be helpful if I put that up on the?
Sure. Yes, thank you. That's fine. So there's this page is a little bit confusing because if you look, that's not it. I'll wait until you get there.
Is that H, administrative expense?
Yes, okay. The amount stated is $15.57. Is that based on a half an hour for the administrative average hour cost?
I think so. Yes. Yeah, I think that's what that is.
Okay, and did the district determine that the office employees require 30 minutes to process a request for meter connections?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So now this, I'm referring to the employee wage cost calculations of that same exhibit. And that is PSC Exhibit 1, the page that I pulled out. It was in Excel file format. Item 23 of Hyden-Leslie District's responses to Commission Order of June 18, 2020. And if you'll refer to the column average overtime wage. There we go. Can you confirm that the amounts in the column are 1.5 times the average hourly wage?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you'll refer to the benefits calculation section of the page.
Okay.
Okay. Those amounts times 1.5 were used in the calculation of the average hourly overtime wage. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
Yeah, okay, so you used 1.5 times in the formula for some of these, like they were cherry-picked instead of going down the line. And what I'm asking is why health insurance cost per hour was not calculated at the 1.5 times rate for the calculation of the average hourly wage with benefits. So why wasn't health insurance cost included in that formula?
In the health insurance?
Uh-huh.
Well, the health insurance cost is fixed no matter how many hours the employee works as long as they're full-time.
Okay. Okay. You've also proposed some new non-recurring charges, connection/turn-on charge, meter test request charge, service call investigation charge, service call investigation charge after hours, damage to meter setting or lid and meter relocate charge. Are those, did you provide those services in the past and just not charge for them?
Some of those have been charged in the past, some of them have not.
How often do you think these charges will occur?
Well, some of them have never occurred. Like the meter test, it was never in our tariff to do a meter test. I would have to reference our billing system to pull some of that data. I don't know offhand how many times.
Okay. So you just propose to charge for them now, but you don't have an estimate for how much that's gonna?
Well, we have an expense estimate of what it would cost the district to do it, but we don't know how many times that would be employed
Okay,
when if we get to implement that.
okay. So you are also involved, or you have provided responses in 2020-85, the case regarding,
That's the COVID case?
Mhm.
Yes.
okay. Do you, I mean, granted that 2020 has been an unusual year and it is not, it has had some abnormalities, but do you plan to request recovery of lost revenue as a result of rulings from case 2020-85?
We may, if that's possible, which we don't even know what that number is going to be as of now. We're hoping our past due customer amounts will be paid. We hope the customers will all pay them. The only thing that we would need to recover would be the penalties. So we may recover that when we see how much that's going to be at the end of this.
Okay. In a post-hearing data request, could you provide the number of occurrences for each non-recurring charge during the test year for those new charges that I listed?
Sure.
Okay. And then you were discussing your cash amount, your cash on hand. And if you refer to your audits, the 2017 audit, 2018 audit, 2019 audit, in 2017, beginning balance of cash and cash equivalents was $1,211,973. But by the end of 2019, the balance had been reduced by $533,830, a decrease of $678,143. Can you explain why the cash and cash equivalents balance decreased by such a large amount in 4 years?
Can we look at that? That doesn't sound,
Okay,
doesn't sound correct.
okay. I have a summary of those audits prepared by staff for reference, but I also have the full audits. How would you like me to enter these as exhibits? They're on file with the PSC, but I'm not sure if they should be exhibits or just for reference.
Why don't you go ahead and file them as exhibits to the testimony, and
Okay,
that way we'll have them in the record when it's filed.
okay.
In the hearing record, anyway.
Okay. And so I don't have copies of those just because we weren't planning on having exhibits, but I can just let you reference these and then
Well, we
make
can
copies
take-
later.
We can take 5 minutes if you like and make copies. It won't take the time to make copies of them.
Okay, whatever.
Why don't
you
we at this
prefer.
time take a 10-minute break so that we can get copies of these so that Mr. Turner will have an opportunity in his council to see what we're discussing. So
Sure.
this hearing will be in. Yes.
Chairman, can I just ask a question before we go? Is Ms. Koenig asking questions about the annual audit reports filed by Hyden-Leslie?
Yes.
I'm happy to share that on my screen if it makes things easier.
Okay.
Look at what, 2015 to 2018 cash equivalents?
Yes.
And what
We
was
used
the
2017 to 2019.
Okay. What was the 2017 number that you mentioned?
Beginning balance of 1.211973.
You said 16 was 1.27639.
We only referenced 2017 to 2019.
Right. Sorry, that would have been the end year 2016. So beginning year 2017 was 1.276.
I have 211,973.
Okay, we'll just go with your numbers and get copies then. That would be fine.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't say that on the audit, that's what Mr. Turner is, doesn't feel like is right. Am I correct, Mr. Turner? You don't think that's the right number?
I don't think so.
Well,
Okay.
let's just take 10 minutes, get a copy and get it in, and we don't have to debate it.
That's fine.
But we'll be in recess until, 5 minutes until 2 o'clock. Mr. Turner and Mr. Wucher were allowed the opportunity to look at the material and discuss it prior to beginning the hearing. So as I understand it, Ms. Koenig, you have a request to make, or you intend to rephrase a question? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
I'd like to withdraw my question to Mr. Turner regarding the audit reports from 2017 through 2019 and ask a new question, if I may.
Okay, yes, and as I understand it, Mr. Turner has now been given some documents.
Yes, sir.
Along with Mr. Wucher. What documents have they been given?
Okay, I would like to introduce the Hyden-Leslie's audit report for 2019 as PSC is Exhibit 2. And I've given that to Mr. Turner, and he's discussed it with Mr. Wucher.
Is there any objection, Mr. Wucher, to introduce?
No, Your Honor, there's no objection.
Let it be introduced, the audit report as a PSC Exhibit 2. And I think there was an Exhibit 1 that allowed that to be filed as well.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Koenig, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, I'd like for you to reference page 10 at the bottom of that 2019 audit report. Are you familiar with the Hyden-Leslie District's loan resolution requirements to maintain a depreciation reserve account?
Yes.
Okay. And are you the person or the contact person to ask about such things at Hyden-Leslie, or is there someone else that?
That'd be me. That would be me, yes.
You, okay. So on the audit report on page 10, it states that at the close of 2019, the reported balance in the depreciation reserve account was $318.86. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are you current for your depreciation reserve account?
RD, I think last year's RD requirement in that account was $130,000 or $140,000 for the RD bonds. That's approximate. I'd have to get back to you with the exact number, but
But you made that deposit?
it was already in there.
You already had it. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, you met that requirement. Okay, so, okay. And you're in compliance. And do you file any written reports about the balances each year to your lenders?
No.
So once you meet that predetermined amount, then you kind of check the box. You don't have to.
Well, they send a notice annually telling you how much your interest and principal cost is going to be for the next year. And it has the requirement of the amount that has to be in that reserve account on there as well.
Okay. So have you ever not been in compliance with that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So you wouldn't know what steps you take if you're not in compliance?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Are you in compliance with your bond ordinances?
As far to my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, with the exception of course, having sufficient rates. I think that it mentions that in the bond documents. So other than that, I don't think so.
Okay. So I mentioned that we are covering several different cases, and so I'd like to ask you about a couple of things that you testified to in the 412 hearing and just follow up on those. So do you recall that in the 412 hearing, there was an issue discussed about the terms of your commissioners? And Judge Lewis testified that only Jesus knows
I
the
do
terms.
recall that, yes.
Okay. Can you update us on whether that's been corrected or what Hyden-Leslie has done about its terms of its commissioners?
I've done some research to try to clarify the term expirations. I've not done any better than I had in the past. That information that we have is still the information that we're using as far as the expiration times. I did spend some time going through fiscal court meeting minutes, trying to get some clarity on some of those, and was not very successful.
So did they change from what you filed in the past annual reports, past couple of annual reports? Did the terms change?
I don't think that the term dates changed.
Okay,
There, of
so,
course, has been another appointment. Our Chairman Roberts, his term expired and was not reappointed, so we had a new board member appointed.
okay, I have in the 2019 annual report and the 2018 annual report that Mr. Roberts' term expired July 25th, 2020. Is that the term?
I don't
Andy?
recall the specific date. I don't recall.
Okay. Should I ask Mr. Roberts about that?
Maybe. I don't know if he would recall the exact date. Maybe so.
But, okay, to your knowledge, did any of the terms change, the terms of the commissioners? Did the judge executive do anything with the terms of the commissioners?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay, and we just looked at your audit reports, but they were discussed as well at the 412 hearing. And if you'll remember, generally, the chairman asked you about, there's a clause included that said that management had not performed a study or that management had not provided certain documents. And you testified that that was standard, or that's what you had been told.
Right.
Okay. At the time, you couldn't really explain more about that. Could you explain any more about that now? Or?
I guess I'm about as fresh on the language of that as I was then.
That's okay.
I did speak to the auditor after that.
Okay.
To see if they could provide some clarity or something. They would be glad to. That was something that they seen in most small utilities.
Okay, and that's what staff followed up with the Christian Sturgeon account auditor. And would you just tell me if this is what they explained to you, that it's standard for small water districts because of the expense of a manager doing that type of study would not be cost effective, and that he had never included a management study in any small water district audit that he performed. Is that accurate?
That sounds accurate.
Okay. So I'd like to move then to any updates from 412. The CBD, the community block grant that was discussed, has that been reapplied for, or?
It has. Yes, it was reapplied for. I actually spoke with CDBG staff this week or last week and they're actually formulating some questions for that application. So it's been filed and signed off on.
Okay.
So the process has begun, and hopefully it will be funded shortly, we hope.
Okay, is that the only new funding that you've applied for?
ARC as well. The pre-application has been submitted for that one also.
Okay. Was there anything that you got to testify late at the 412 hearing. It was at the end of the day, and we were just wrapping up things. But there was a lot discussed about funding, and then a lot discussed about theories of what they thought happened with the board with Judge Lewis's testimony. Did you agree with his assessment, or had you heard anything to the contrary, or could you add any light to that situation?
I don't have any direct knowledge of any of that. I wasn't involved with the district as a managerial, in managerial capacity, so I don't have any direct knowledge other than just hearsay here or there. So I wouldn't feel comfortable repeating anything that I've heard.
Okay. Were you surprised by Judge Lewis's testimony?
Which part?
I guess, was it an accurate portrayal of the relationship between Judge Lewis and the board?
I'm not aware of their relationships. Like I said, I wasn't involved as a general manager. During that period, I was actually in Knott County.
Okay, and I'm asking about your experience as you became manager, when you were manager. I guess I'm asking if you felt like it was accurate description of, he described you and Mr. Roberts reporting to him that the water district was in trouble, and that you guys maybe had discussed it 2 or 3 times, but
I only had one conversation with Mr. Sizemore when he was judge. Buddy and I think had one, I'm sorry, Augustus, the Chairman Roberts, we had one meeting with him, but he never gave us any kind of direction or anything like that.
okay.
It was just a meet and greet, a courtesy.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm talking about you met with Judge Lewis.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that was accurate, those exchanges where he said he did not say anything about the rates, he didn't, and that there was no deadline given to him on the block grant. You agree with that?
I did. Mr. Lewis and I actually went to Frankfurt, and we spoke with CDBG, KIA, and ARC that day, and there was never any mention of a deadline. As far as meeting with him outside of that, Mr. Roberts and I, whenever he was elected, went to his office and wanted to meet with him, let him know where we were as the district, where we were going. You know, we had some capital projects coming up, just kind of educate him, bring him up to speed. But other than that, I'm not sure what else you're inquiring about.
Okay, and then does the county attorney attend the board meetings?
No.
Okay. All right. I'd like to ask you some questions about your filing in 1941, the final report, or final status report that you filed in 1941.
Okay.
First thing I'd like to ask about, and I'll just run through, so just to refresh your memory, the final report was due September 22nd, and you filed a response to direct specific orders that were issued in Appendix E to that November 22nd, 2019 order, and you were also to respond to the general orders given in the body of the November 22nd, 2019 order. And I'd just like to pull it all together because that's really where this started, right? As far as the funding and finding out that Hyden-Leslie was having financial troubles, and they were identified in 1941 as having in excess of 35% water loss. In the 412 hearing, you testified, though, that Hyden-Leslie would have done, they would have come in for a rate case anyway if there hadn't have been 1941 or any of the other cases. Is that still accurate? It's hard to reference that testimony because I don't have, I mean, it's on video transcript, but if you don't recall, that's fine, just respond.
I don't recall the specific, is it,
Okay.
412, is that, which, was that the case?
Right, the last hearing that we had in February, you stated that you didn't think that Hyden-Leslie would have done anything different, that they were going to come in for a rate case anyway, that they knew that the rates needed to be raised, and that basically, I think that was when you said chose to ride the horse that they picked at the beginning and stayed with the horse and stuck with it too long. Is that your assessment? Is that still accurate?
Yes, I do recall that. And,
Okay.
and the reason I stated that was just kind of clarifying that the water district had realized that trying to go through the 023 case to get the loan and the rates was probably not the best idea. That I was trying to portray that, I felt like the board had came along and realized we got to do this opportunity rate filing either way. And then not to come across like that, but
That's okay. I appreciate the clarification. So I'm just going to run through some of the things that you have filed for 1941 and that you checked off from the Appendix E, and then I've got a couple questions. So you state that Mr. Maggard is your representative to federal and state funding agencies, and that the status of your funding for each project is currently listed in WRIS. Do you recall, or do you need that in front of you for reference?
yeah, I think, that's accurate.
Well, okay. And just if you recall generally, and then you've provided a fire department water usage change in your policy there. Okay. And then it gets to the water audit. And you had referenced in your filing in May that that you had reached out to government agencies about what a water audit was and what was required for a water audit, and that you could not get a response. However, our inspection staff had reached out and felt like you personally were under a good understanding of what was required of the water audit. Can you clarify that at all? Because you did file a water audit in the end.
I thought I understood, but I was trying to make sure that my assumptions were correct.
Okay.
And
And did you clarify that with the inspection staff and
Well,
feel confident about that?
no, I never felt confident about it.
Okay.
Your Honor, can I just interject here for a moment, because there have been, in addition to representing Hyden-Leslie, I also represent Big Sandy Water District, and have relayed to both districts on this issue of the water audit. Big Sandy Water District submitted a written request to the Commission's Executive Director, I believe in early February, asking for clarification as to what methodology should be used to do the water audit. It never received a response. It did receive indication that the Commission was going to respond at some point and provide clarification, but we never received it. There was an order issued that indicated that there should be meetings with staff. I had relayed that information to Mr. Turner, but I had also done an Open Records Act request to ask specifically for written guidance that the Commission had provided. And the only thing we got back was an email message to Big Sandy and apparently an EPA publication that the staff had provided to one entity. In speaking with Mr. Turner and with other people, the only methodology that we were aware of was the methodology, the M36 manual of the American Water Works Association. And Mr. Turner, after talking to Mr. Turner, I think Mr. Turner made the decision to go ahead and use that methodology and to use free software from the AWWA to go ahead and do an audit. And while he was doing that, I, on behalf of this district and on Big Sandy, approached the Kentucky River Research Institute. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but there's a research institute at UK that's headed by Dr. Ormsby, and approached them to ask if they would go ahead and do a comprehensive water audit. They were in the process of doing one for, I believe, 2 of the other utilities that were subject to the water loss investigation. They agreed to do that, but because of funding issues, they could not do that this last fiscal year, the year that ended September 30th. They have scheduled, I believe, to do a water audit for Hyden-Leslie as well as Big Sandy. But I believe Mr. Turner kind of decided that he was going to get this completed to meet the requirements of the staff. But in terms of guidance that was out there was an effort made to try to get some guidance to see what was being done, because the M36 manual is more complex than some other items might be. And I had heard discussion, I think Mr. Turner had also heard discussion, that there might be less labor-intensive methods. But we could never get clarification as to what the commission wanted. And so based on that, Mr. Turner decided to go ahead and go by the gold standard. But I just wanted to clarify that because there were requests made to try to find out what the commission wanted. And I think Mr. Turner, I know for myself, we were extremely frustrated because we were asking a very simple question and we would take whatever answer we were given, but we really weren't given an answer.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I object to you saying you did not receive a response to your filing, because there was a response filed in March that stated inspections would meet with any of the water districts to explain the water audit with them. And because we were in a state of emergency, that it had to be conducted via email or means that qualified for social distancing. So did our inspection staff meet with them? I can bring our staff to testify if that's required, but you did receive a response, and the commission explained how any of the water districts could get assistance on what the water audit required. It was very simple, our baseline, but the commission did not want to accept or adopt somebody else's version of a water audit to say that only one way of doing it was acceptable. But there is a response filed in the record, and I understand your frustration. I feel like that's been recorded, but I guess inspection staff had the impression that they had explained it, they had met with Mr. Turner, and that he was fine. And of course, then you did file a water audit, and inspection staff has reviewed it. I do have questions about it, but they found it acceptable.
Your Honor, I want to note one thing, and again, I apologize if I sound a little bit frustrated by it, but throughout the water loss investigation and today, my clients have been told, where is your written policy? The commission issued an order in November of last year stating you had to do a comprehensive water audit. I assumed that the commission had an idea and it was down on paper and simply it could be referred to. We never received that. And I don't want to belabor the point because it doesn't matter. I think my client did a better job by using the M36 manual, and I certainly encourage all my clients to use it. And but it is a point that if the commission is going to order some item, the utilities may not understand, and when they ask for guidance, we would assume that it's already down, that there's a policy there, and that it can just simply be disseminated. And in this case, it wasn't. To have to call the commission and say, what do you mean, is a little bit frustrating. And I understand the COVID crisis and everything else, and I apologize for my statement today, and I won't belabor the point. But I just wanted to make that clear for the record. We did make an attempt to go ahead and understand what the commission wanted. And when it was unclear, Hyden-Leslie and the other districts that I represent, we went ahead and got assistance from another non-governmental public agency to go ahead and comply with the commission's order.
Your communications are always between you or your client and staff, is that correct?
Yes, sir, either the staff or the executive director. There was actually a formal request made for, under the Open Records Act, for the guidance that the commission had put out.
And what was the response?
There was a copy of an email message that was sent to a Big Sandy Water District that had a very it had a somewhat of a description on how to perform a water audit that didn't did not seem to make much sense. It talked about simply recording the usage at a particular meter. And the other item was a copy of a 2003 Environmental Protection Agency article about the benefits of water audits.
Now, does your client, if Hyden-Leslie or Big Sandy, intend for the third party you mentioned to ultimately conduct a water audit, or have you decided not to do that?
No, I believe, Mr. Turner can ask what Hyden-Leslie intends to do. Big Sandy has, I believe the University of Kentucky has reached out to both of those entities. And the other client I have, Estill County Water District, the Institute actually reached out to them to offer their services, and they have performed a water audit consistent with the N36 manual already.
And this is at University of Kentucky's cost or your client's cost?
It's, well, actually, I assume it's at the federal government. They have a grant that allows them to assist small water systems. So that was one of the benefits of using that they did not have to expend any money. And the University of Kentucky was going to train them on how to do the water audits.
Will those audits be filed here once they're completed?
The first one will, and to the extent that the commission wants it updated, if we receive that directive, we'll file that. In response to Hyden-Leslie, the district filed, I think, a paper copy, but also filed the more detailed spreadsheet after it had, we had reached out to the Kentucky Rural Community Assistance Program, who is certified to validate the audits. And they went out and validated the audit to show how strong it was and where it needed to be improved. I think Mr. Turner can discuss that in greater detail.
All right, well, thank you. I think we probably exhausted the water audit issue, at least for the time being. Ms. Coney, do you have a...
Okay, yeah, and I guess I'll save my technical questions on the water audit, but to say, I mean, our inspection staff did review the water audit, and I believe Roy Gray said that he met with you on the water audit requirements. Is that, do you recall?
We did speak.
You spoke about
the
it?
water requirements, because I had some questions about it.
Yeah, and so it was essentially a simple assessment, a simple formula to review your water system in general terms, correct? And assess good or bad what your water system.
Well, I assume, an audit in general does that, but I was never really clear on what to do. However, I know that's an industry standard, the AWWA, so
Right.
we just assumed.
Right, so there are also,
Wait, Ms. Coney, let him answer the question. You finish your
So
answer.
we just assumed that would be the best methodology, and then it would be accepted by everyone. So we just went ahead and done that process. We didn't know if that was going to be the requirement or not, but we wanted to satisfy the order. We didn't want to ask for an extension or anything. We just wanted to satisfy the order and move on.
okay. Is there a written policy to repeat the audit yearly?
We don't have a policy for that.
Okay. Would you agree that the information you obtain from your audit, maybe some of the data would even be more valuable if you have a repeat in a year and be able to compare?
Absolutely, but I feel that the monthly water loss reports that we do is also a good indicator monthly, each month. If you base everything on an annual report, you're not really going to know where you are until the end of that year.
Right, but if
So
you do
I think both are good, but I'm certainly not opposed to any tool that will help us. We're in favor of anything that like I said, will help us in our process.
okay. And do you agree, in addition to the monthly reports, that there's value to a water audit, a yearly water audit that is more in depth than the monthly water loss reports?
With the water audit that we did, the AWWA, that's the only one I can really speak to, but I mean, it was beneficial.
Okay. I guess staff only had one question as far as like trying to look at, they felt like it was a good start, but had a question as you used an average operating pressure of 199. They wondered where you got that.
Well, there's probably not a real good way to do that, and there's plenty of methods you could use. But what we did is we used all of our pressure zones that have known pressures, and we averaged them. So that was an average based on the pressure at that point, or at those particular points throughout our system.
Okay. Moving on to your written leak detection policy that you also filed in the final report for 1941. You mentioned that your Phase 3 project is supposed to address water loss.
It will assist with water loss. I wouldn't consider it a water loss project, but it will assist because in the project is rehabilitation of some booster pump stations and with the addition of VFDs, which will decrease pressure surges of water hammers. So that could help on some of our new leaks. There's also some contingency money in there that we plan to replace a creek crossing that we've had some issues out of in the past, as well as adding some zone meters.
Okay.
So there's some items in there.
I'm sorry?
There's some items in there to address water loss.
Okay. Zone meters, they were mentioned in the body of the 2019, November 22nd, 2019 order. In the general recommendations and orders, and I'll just run down, but looking to see if you have addressed those general orders. 3 of them dealt with zone meters. And my understanding was, after contacting inspection staff, was you don't have zone meters, but instead you use the drawdown method that you explained in the hearing in 412 to instead of the zone meters. Can you explain that a little bit?
That's correct. We still need zone meters, but that's the method that we have right now to use. That's the tools that we have, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
We still need the zone meters, but when you do those drawdowns, it lets you know what's coming out of that tank. You're not getting a total like you would with a zone meter, but you can pick those low demand times and determine what type of loss that you have in that area.
Okay. And another general order was plan for employee coverage. Do you feel like the general recommendations were to make sure that you have staff that's dedicated to leak detection and enough staff and enough employees to cover your plan to address the water loss? Do you feel like that you've got enough staff?
I do. I feel like we have enough staff. We operate pretty lean. We need everybody, but I feel like we're staffed appropriately.
Okay. As far as the 4th general recommendation was meter replacement and testing policies. Inspection staff gave me your last meter report or your last update on meter testing. Are you deficient in your meter testing?
We're about 260 meters behind, but we hope to have all those tested by the end of the year. We've got a new meter testing company that's doing ours right now. The people that were doing theirs before, I think, may have had some turnover, and they don't have anybody qualified to do the meter testing anymore. So we've had to go to someone else to get our meters tested.
Who's testing your meters now?
C.I. Thornburg,
Who tested them before?
North Manchester.
North Manchester.
Water Association, I'm sorry. North Manchester.
North
Water-
Manchester Water Association
Yeah.
tested your meters.
Yeah. They had a certified test bench and people who could test them.
Enough said.
So you reported to inspection staff that you were planning to do 60 per day to get caught up. Has that been a long time since you made that goal? Yes, that was in an email and in response to an inspection in July.
60 per day?
Yeah, it says, I can show you it.
Well,
It was an email to Aaron Donges. We're working with inspection, testing, and maintenance. They're planning to test 60 per day until we get caught up. Was that before you lost your testing site?
I don't know, I don't think anybody could do 60 a day. Maybe it was 60 a month. I may have mistyped if that's from me.
Okay.
But
Do you mind, may I approach?
Yes, you may.
I can show you before.
Would you like me to hand it to the?
Yes, please. Do you recall sending that email to Aaron Donges? If it's a mistake, I understand.
I'm sorry, I've made a mistake in my draft because
Okay.
it's not even feasible to do 60 per day. That's probably going to be 60 per month.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just gonna
Sorry,
hand, Mr. Wutcher, this is the inspection that it references, just for your. And that just lists the
Okay.
results of the inspection, just to further orient yourself with that. Okay, the fifth general recommendation was evaluating for the frequency of rate case, your frequency of rate case. And in the 412 hearing, you talked about evaluating for rate sufficiency, that you did that quite a bit for the board, that you did that perhaps for every board meeting, I can't recall exactly. But at the end, you agreed that it would be good to put that into a written policy. And I'm just asking for an update. Has that happened yet, or?
We discussed, the board, we discussed that, and we actually discussed that recently. I think we passed I know there's some language for KIA that we had to agree to reference the rates. I think it was annually. I'll have to get back with you on the exact policy, if it was a resolution or what that was.
Okay, and just while we're on the subject, I am going to ask you for your opinion on these changes that you've submitted for 1941 and how effective you feel that they are. Or maybe, it might take repeating it next year or something, for instance, the water audit or whatever, for it to be effective. But I'd like your opinion on specifically the fact that the subject where you said, they chose the horse and they continue, beat the dead horse trying to get the funding, but they waited too long to file the rate case, was essentially your testimony in 412. Do you think that there is anything, that can be put in place to guard against that situation again?
As the district or as for the?
As the district or the PSC? The 41 cases, looking at what we can do on the front end before systems get into the situation that the parties to 1941 were, the state that they were in.
I think required rate filings would resolve all those issues.
Okay.
I think that 3 years, 5 years would resolve those issues.
Okay, and then the last general recommendation order was about defining the roles of the board and management. Do you feel like that what you've done for the final report or what you've done since 1941, do you feel like you've addressed that at all?
I'm sorry, I'm not following the question.
So the order in 1941 and the attached appendix with the report, investigative report, discussed making sure that were defined roles for the manager and the board of commissioners for the district, and job descriptions, what their roles were in planning for the district, who needed to be in charge of what, and making sure that those people knew they were responsible. That board members were responsible for getting training, that management should be reporting to the board and making sure that they're made aware of things, that the board's responsible ultimately for the actions of the district, things like that. Do you feel like that was an issue before, or?
You know, I can't speak to before I was there, but I really tried to educate the board when I came, you know, when I started at Hyden-Leslie. I felt like that they were receptive. I'm not sure if there's not been any role changes necessarily. I don't think, you know, they took an administrative role as far as, you know, reviewing the information that they have in front of them.
Do you have a job description? Does your
Yes, I think it's been filed. I think.
it might have. There's been a lot of things filed, and like I said, I do want to try to bring it all together. There were some things filed in 1941, some board minutes, and job descriptions and things of that such. But is there anything else that you can speak to as far as the policies that you've put in place, the tariff changes that you've made? Do you have any strong complaints against 1941, or something that we've asked you to do that you didn't feel like had any effect, or you know, we'd like to hear your viewpoint?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
I think Dr. Matthews may have to leave at 3 o'clock, so if you don't mind, Vice Chairman Chandler, I'll skip over and let her ask, see if she has any questions and ask before she has to leave. Especially since this morning when I've monopolized all of her time.
That's okay. I don't have any questions for Mr. Turner.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Turner. Can you see me on the screen there?
I can.
I apologize for that then. I just want to make sure you can see my facial expressions or not. The additional employee, I had a question about the calculation. I think the document that Mr. Woocher had up that he was doing some direct examination on with you was talking about the expected, I think was the title of the document, the expected cost of the employee. Do you know if that's a hypothetical cost or the actual hourly rate that employee, that 12th employee that you all were discussing actually is being paid?
The hourly rate is correct. The only thing that would vary would be the amount of overtime.
Okay. All right. The other question I have, you stated earlier today you did the calculations, or you were responsible for the responses in the 2020-85 docket, the COVID docket, to the June data request. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And one of the questions in that docket was about calculation and write-off of bad debt. Do you remember that?
Not specifically, but if you could remind
Well,
me.
so the question I'm looking at here, it just says, and you're the responding witness, and the question was, explain the decision criteria concerning when the utility writes off bad debt. And the response is, Hyden-Leslie County Water District writes off a debt as bad debt when a customer service is terminated for non-payment. Could you talk to me about that for a minute and the timing of that? Is it if somebody owes money and they don't pay and you terminate them, you write it off at that moment? How does that work?
No, it's the next following month. We'll write that off as bad debt when we get, if we can't get mail to them, we can't actually call them. Probably wasn't specific enough in that response. But no, we don't write that off immediately.
You write off as bad debt, do you all send any of it to try to get recovered? Is 1 month your time period on trying to recover those amounts?
Yes, typically it's if it's not collected or paid on the following month, then it's written off at that point.
Okay. And so, let me just get this right. You terminate if there's no payment and no communication within the first month following the termination. When the books close for that second month, you write off the bad debt related to that account that was disconnected.
That's correct.
Okay. I had a question, about your conversation earlier with Ms. Koenig about the disconnect, reconnect. I think that's sorry, Exhibit Q that Mr. Pinnell worked on. She was asking about the salary expenses or the labor expenses for that calculation, and you stated that it was based on 2 people, right? And that was ordinary. Do you remember that response?
Yes, to the new meter service.
Well, so, and that's what I wanted to ask about. So the non-recurring cost justification, for connection charge, reread, reconnection, and service call all include that same hourly rate of $32.09. But do you send 2 people out for each one of those items?
For which items? Which ones?
Yeah, I'll so they're all for the same. It's for connection
Okay.
charge, reread, reconnection, and service call.
Okay, no, all of those would not, like a reread wouldn't be a 2-person requirement.
Yeah, and Mr. Rucher has pulled it up there. Do you see all the different types of charges at the top?
Yes, I do.
So reread would just be 1 person. Would a reconnect be 1 person?
No, yes, I'm sorry, it would be 1 person as well.
And then the service call.
Service call would be 1 person.
And so the connection, what is that connection charge? What can you explain that situation to me?
What's on the screen there?
Yeah, it says connection charge. Could you just tell me what a connection charge is envisioned under this tariff? Like what the activity is?
That's if someone needs a meter installed, if there's already a previous setting there, and all that
Okay.
needs to be installed is a meter.
And that's a 2-person job?
No, that's a 1-person job.
Okay. So would you agree then that $32.09 reflects 2 individuals, even though all those actions only require one employee?
That third, can we get that back up on the screen? I think that just reflected 1 person, didn't it?
Well, so that's what was being asked earlier. Does it reflect 2 or does it reflect 1?
So what's on the screen, the non-recurring charges for connection charge, reread, reconnection, and service charge is only for 1 person, 1 employee.
So that $32 is for 1 employee.
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the previous page, the $43.18, is that for 1 employee for the after-hours charges?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then can you explain then, so then there's the office at a half an hour at $15.57 for both of those?
I'm sorry, could
Do you see that?
repeat that? Sometimes the sound is not good here.
Yeah, that's fine. You see the clerical and office expense, there's $15.57 included for the labor in the office.
Uh-huh.
And that's the same for both, it's the same for both activities. One's after hours and one's normal hours. Why is the field labor at time and a half or some sort of overtime, and why is the office labor considered to be normal time?
The office labor, if it was after hours, they would just perform that duty the next day. So during regular hours is when that would be performed.
So you're saying that they would go out and do the reconnect at night, and then the next morning somebody in the office would do the paperwork for it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so you did tell Ms. Koenig that you can provide the information for the number of disconnects, reconnects, and service calls during the test year?
Yes, for all the charges that we have previously charged, yes, I can provide those numbers.
Okay, and let me ask you a real quick question on operating in times of COVID is more reflective in times of COVID, but about these non-recurring charges. So would you agree that whether you send out, you have 12 employees, right? Total employees?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so let's just assume that 6 of them are field employees. Do you pay them, as long as it's during business hours, do you pay them the same regardless of whether you disconnect or reconnect somebody or send somebody out on a service call?
We do, yes.
Okay, and so in the event, like during, let's just make up a time period, between March the 16th and October the 20th, where you're ordered not to disconnect anybody, you would agree that you have an assumption in your rates, if you have these non-recurring tariffs, that some portion of labor is going to be covered by non-recurring charges, but if you don't actually have the non-recurring charges occur, those are expenses that you are incurring, but that you're not recovering any of the rates for, right?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it does, yes, because those employees are gonna work 40 hours, and they're gonna get.
Right,
paid.
and it's the same thing with the late fees, right? Your all's revenue requirement, whenever it was last set, it assumed some number of late fees were gonna be assessed in a given year. And if you're not assessing them, then that's a reduction in revenues, but not a reduction in expenses necessarily.
Yes.
Does it create an incentive for you all to charge the late fees?
I'm sorry, does it what?
I mean, does it create an incentive for you all to perform these non-recurring charges? In the sense that if you don't, then you're not going to recover revenues that you depend on?
I'm not following the question, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll withdraw the question. The last question I have in the 85 docket, the responses indicated that your all's customer on-time pay percentage was around 66%. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about it, because I understand that the questions could have been confusing. So you provided them. Would you agree that that response indicates that of your customers, on average, for your customers, 66, 67% of them pay their bill on time each month?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you don't pay your time, well, let's just ask, if it's 65%, just a nice round number, does that mean that 35% of your customers are being assessed late fees in an ordinary month?
That's correct.
Okay. And then per the response in the 85 docket, it also indicated that, to question number 8, that as of June 30, when asked, assuming the moratorium on disconnection was not in effect, provide the number of customers in each class that would be subject to disconnection. And the response you provided was, as of June 30, there were 323 people that would be subject to disconnect. Do you remember around about that number?
I'm assuming that was correct.
Well, no, that's fine. We'll make it easy on everybody here. It won't take 2 seconds to just pull it up. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Okay, I can see it.
Okay. So do you see those numbers?
Yes.
Okay. So the questions there that I just asked, the number subject other than the commission's moratorium, who would be subject to disconnect? The June 30 number is 323. See that?
Yes.
And you've got about 3,700 customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would indicate that just under, or we'll just, again, round numbers, approximately 10% of your customers are subject to disconnection.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So if approximately 34% of your customers are paying late, right, and 10% of your customers were subject to disconnection, does that to indicate to us, is your takeaway from that a quarter of your customers, I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, a quarter of your customers are paying late, but paying before it's time to be disconnected?
Yes, that's what that number implies, yes.
Okay. And I guess I'm just going to ask, if they're late, they're being charged a late fee, right? And if they're paying before disconnection, then it would indicate to me that, I'll just make the statement that the disconnection is probably the action that's changing the event that's changing their actions. Do you think that the late fees that you all charge have any effect on whether people timely pay?
Sure, yeah. I know me as a paying customer, it does for me. I don't want a 10% penalty.
Well, but let me ask. So through the first few months of this, your on-time pay percentage for customers didn't change at all, right? Here, and I'll actually, the number of customers that paid on time, even though since March you couldn't assess late fees, more customers paid on time than the historical average, right?
Okay.
So if you couldn't assess late fees, but more people are paying on time, and historically 25% of people pay late, but pay before they are subject to disconnection, I guess does that thesis sort of that it affects people's payment on time, does it bear itself out in the numbers?
Well, I think the late penalty definitely affects people, but is it going to make someone pay on time versus not on time that doesn't worry about being delinquent? Maybe not. You know, you can, as that goes up, and we're not charging the late fees. I see what you're saying. I'm not sure why that number is going up. If that was during a stimulus period, and maybe people paying a little extra. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, and I would implore you to look at that, whether in July and August it changed. I guess September you'd have numbers too now, whether it went up or down, whether stimulus changed. But it certainly was interesting to me, and I wanted to ask sort of what you thought may be impacting that. The last question is about deposits. Do you know what you currently require for deposits?
$30.
$30. And so you all are, I think, proposing 74.
Yes.
And how does that interact with the write-off? Do you all net that if you still have that customer's deposit? If they leave, if you've terminated them, they owe money, you don't contact them after that month, and you write them off, do you all net that deposit against it if you all hold it, or how do you all account for that deposit you have?
If the customer has a balance, we use the deposit toward the balance on that account. Anything that's left over, we refund. And of course, we apply that deposit to their account if it's going to fall in a bad debt situation.
Okay, so you apply it, and then the residual amount of that account is written off?
Yes, if that account is going to be classified as bad debt, yes, we'll write the rest of that off.
Okay, all right. That's all the questions I have, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner, I just have a few. One, I guess, is to point out, when you're talking about customer relations or customer education, I didn't bring it here because I didn't think about it until those questions were asked by Ms. Coney. But I think Kentucky Rural Water Association has, a series of management booklets, one of which discusses educating the consumer or the ratepayer about what you're doing, what your system needs, why you're doing it, so that they can buy into your program. And I would suggest to you that perhaps that would be a good idea, especially when you're on the verge of a 70% rate increase. I also think that the reason that you require a 70% rate increase is because I think, according to the testimony in the previous case last year, the 041 case, it was that Hyden-Leslie County Water District had not come before the Public Service Commission for a rate adjustment since 1978, and that the last time that the Hyden-Leslie Water District had obtained any kind of rate increase was in connection with a rural development loan under KRS 278.023. And so that left you a lot of years using all the depreciation and every other scrap of money that you could come up with, basically to maintain your day-to-day operations. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And then, of course, if all the money is used over time for day-to-day operations, you have nothing left to repair or replace your infrastructure. So in the end, it looks like to the consumer that we're going all these years and prices aren't going up, but in reality, you're incurring a hell of a debt going forward that somebody has to pay. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
It's like when I decide I don't have enough money to change the oil in my car. At some point, you're going to need a new engine, right?
That's right.
So, I guess what I'm saying is that I agree with you, and I applaud your opinion, probably, which is contrary to the political, perhaps, and public view, that a rate increase or a rate case every 3 to 5 years would be a good thing both for the utility and for the customer, because in the end, a stitch in time probably saves 9 or 10. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I don't think you'd find a general manager or an administrator that would object to that. I think, we want the revenue. We need the revenue to operate.
All right. So do you have any opinion or idea, I know before you came, as to why the Hyden-Leslie County Water District basically had refrained from asking for a rate increase before the Public Service Commission for a period of, 42 years? Do you have any idea why that would be?
No, I mean, other than the mechanism they typically used was through rural development, and I think that's what they were familiar with.
Well, of course, the financial analysts, accountants here can help solve problems or identify problems that somebody might miss locally, but they can't do that if we can never look at your records. So we have been in the process of ordering, we have requested the General Assembly to put in, adopt a statute that required a rate review, if not a rate increase, at least a review every 3 years. But we have ordered 23 rural water districts to file rate cases between November of 2019 and today. Those are going forward, and suggested that another do so. So I don't know, we'd like to see you do well and see your ratepayers do well, but I think that in order to have good, clean water at an acceptable price requires small incremental increases along that allows you to use your depreciation money to replace your infrastructure. Then we don't need a 70% increase all at one time. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
In this case, and we haven't considered this, we would, I guess, but it's never come up, I don't think, in an RF case. Mr. Wucher would be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but have you incurred, has Hyden-Leslie incurred legal fees and expenses for your expert, Mr. Alliance, in preparing this case?
There was actually some funds to pay for that service, so we're not out any cost for that.
Okay.
District.
Well, the reason I want to point that out is that I guess there are certain test people say, well, we don't want to come in for rate increases because we can't recover our rate case expense. I don't know why you can't, as long as it's reasonable. But, now, the staff recommended a surcharge of $1.53 per meter for a period of 48 months, with the funds to be used to help your repair leaks, work on leak detection. You probably haven't had an opportunity to think about how you would do that, but if you have, could you tell us how you would use the surcharge money? If it's $1.53 per meter for 48 months, I think would just generate like $262,872 or so. How could you use that money?
Well, we have many places where we could spend it, as you would imagine, but it really depends on how our Phase 3 project goes. Depending on that being funded would determine what I would want to use the surcharge money for. But it would either fall in for meter replacement, customer meter replacement, because we're coming up on some test dates for a lot of our meters, and we need to go to a radio read system. Our main storage tank that has the issue, or master meters. So So those would be the top 3 items that I would use that search.
With the
on.
master measure, you could zone your system off.
That's right.
With assisted leak detection.
That's right.
Insofar as your board is concerned, and I don't want to put you between a rock and a hard place because they're here, but do you think at this time that the water district commissioners understand what their role is as a commission and what your role is as general manager?
I think so.
That you run the system as sort of the president and they're the board of directors who set policy and basically look over what you're doing?
I feel like they've got a good understanding of that.
Do you think they adhere to those roles?
I think so.
You don't feel any infringement on your role as, we have had some, as you probably obviously didn't want to, after going through a hearing yourself like last year, you wouldn't want to watch some of these others, but some of the water district commissioners actually do like magistrates do sometimes on the fiscal court. They want to go out and direct the road crew and put blacktop here and fix a bridge there to a church or somewhere else that maybe they shouldn't. You haven't had those problems.
No, I've not had those issues at all.
With respect to the county judge executive and fiscal court, do you have any opinion as to whether you and your water district board can and do exercise independence separate and apart from the fiscal court and the county judge?
I feel like we do, yes. Independent completely.
I think your people understand that once they're appointed, they run they run this organization and not the fiscal court or the county judge?
Yeah, I feel that that's their opinion on that.
I have no further questions. Anything further?
Nothing
Mr.
further.
Wucher, anything?
Your Honor, just one item, if I could. Mr. Turner, in preparation for today's hearing, did you prepare a chart or an exhibit that indicated the history of Hyden-Leslie's water loss?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I'm going to, if I may, approach the witness.
You may.
Hand that to you.
Thank you.
You may recognize this report. This report is one of many that our Water District Board of Commissioners receives each month. And it's a history of our water loss monthly back through 2011. And it just reflects our improvement over the past few years. As you can see, in 2000, we implemented a lot of things in end of 17, first of 18. And you can see now that we're seeing our results, and it's pretty clear to see. But
So,
there's 19% last month. The month before that was 17%. So we're extremely happy with those results. We're not saying we're finished. We're never going to be finished at Hyden-Leslie. We have a lot of reoccurring failures, or new failures, I guess I should say. So our water loss is going to fluctuate. It's not we fix some water losses down and we're done. So that'll never be the case. But we're diligent and hope to continue to improve with these numbers.
the district had set a target for the end of the year for its water loss, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is that target?
The target was 20% by the end of 2020.
Okay.
20 by 20.
And so do you expect to be able to reach that by the end of December?
We hope so. We're close enough to say that we're pretty successful.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor. I would ask that the chart be entered into the record as Hyden-Leslie County Water District Exhibit Number 1.
Any objection, Ms. Conlon?
No objection.
Let it be marked as Hyden-Leslie County Exhibit 1.
That's all I
Chairman,
have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Conlon, again?
Mr. Richards, I can ask one question to follow up on
Yes.
something you asked. I just want to ask Mr. Turner, when you said that the cost was covered for the prosecution of the case, did you just mean by Mr. Lyons? Is that right?
That's correct, just Mr. Vines.
Is Mr. Rucher's cost being covered by Kentucky Rural Water Association?
No, it is not. The district has incurred that expense.
So I would just ask or recommend, I guess I'd say to the chairman's point earlier, that to the extent that Mr. Woocher has, that the district has incurred a cost for Mr. Woocher's assistance in this case, and explicitly for this case, that you may want to provide some evidence in the record to that effect, and in seeking some sort of amortization of those costs.
Okay.
What, invoices, would that be sufficient, Commissioner?
Whatever, that
Okay.
I think that would be sufficient. Just that's under affidavit, of course, but yes.
Yeah, invoices, and you could have an affidavit from Mr. Turner that he received and they've been paid or something. Or it was still unpaid, but that basically, you accepted, you thought the service was, obviously was needed and the hours spent were fair. But there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to recover those and pass them on to rates. Either way, because the ratepayers are paying for it, it's just a question of whether you have enough left to be able to actually provide water.
And just lastly, if the district has a position on the amortization of those costs, the time period.
I'm sorry, what was that? The amortization of what?
The amortization of those costs, so.
Legal fees spread over the
Oh,
period of
what,
time.
are you asking what the time would be?
Yeah, so if some utilities request that rate case expenses be recovered over a 3-year period or 4-year period or a 5-year period, whatever time they think is fair, so that it's usually the timing between their next this case and their next anticipated case.
We don't want you to go over 3 to 5 because we want you back in here before then.
I don't have a preference or a, I would think 2 years would be plenty, or maybe even 12 months. It's probably something the board would need to discuss, I guess.
Well, when you file your affidavit with the invoices, if you just tell us what you think.
Okay.
Make a request.
We'll think about that a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, and Mr. Woocher can help you on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Woocher, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You've been up here longer than we thought, Mr. Turner. We appreciate your testimony, and you may step down. And why don't we take a 5-minute break? I need to, and we have our lady come in to basically sanitize the witness box. Thank you. We'll be in recess until 3:25.
Yes, sir.
We're now back on the record. Mr. Woocher, will you call your next witness?
Your Honor, my next witness is Alan Valines, and Mr. Valines is going to be testifying by video conferencing. I don't know if he can hear us or not. Mr. Valines, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Mr. Valines, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Woocher, you may ask.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Valines, would you please state your name and business address?
Alpha Lines, 690 Scottsboro Circle, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
And are you currently employed by the Kentucky Rural Water Association?
I have a consulting relationship with Kentucky Rural Water.
Okay, but before I get into greater in that, could you just briefly describe for us your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in engineering technology, a master's degree in engineering administration.
Okay, and prior to being a consultant with Kentucky Rural Water Association, where were you employed?
Right out of school, I was employed at 2 different consulting engineering firms in Kentucky and Tennessee. And then in 1980, I came to work for Warren County Water District in Bowling Green.
And how long were you employed there?
33 years.
And very briefly, can you tell us what positions you held there?
When I first came to work at the Water District, I was in charge of the engineering department, served as manager of engineering until 2005, and then was appointed general manager.
And when did you, I assume you retired from the district at some point?
Retired in 2013,
Okay. And how long have you had your consulting relationship with Kentucky Rural Water Association?
since 2014.
Okay. And does Kentucky Rural Water Association have a contract with the Appalachian Regional Commission to provide assistance to water utilities in eastern Kentucky?
Yes, it does.
And is one of those assistance activities the performance of rate studies?
Yes.
And did Hyden-Leslie request that Kentucky Rural Water Association conduct a study to determine the appropriate rates that it should charge for water service?
Yes.
Okay, and did Kentucky Rural Water Association conduct such a study?
Yes.
And can you tell me what your involvement in the preparation of that study was?
I performed the study personally.
Okay. Did you assist or prepare the schedules for the application that was filed with the commission?
Yes, I did.
And were you responsible for the entire application, or were there some exhibits that were the responsibility of others?
Some exhibits were provided by the district.
Did you also prepare responses to the request for information contained in the order of June 18, 2020, and the commission staff's second request for information?
Some of those responses, yes.
Okay, and for those responses for which you were identified as the responding witness, if you were asked those questions today, would your answers to those questions be the same as was originally reported to the commission?
Yes, they would.
Okay, do you have any changes or revisions that you would like to make to the responses or to the schedules that you prepared for the district?
No.
Okay. Do you adopt today as your testimony the exhibits and schedules of the application and your responses to the request for information to the June 18, 2020 order and the PSC staff second request for information?
Yes, I did.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. I turn the witness over to commission staff.
Ms. Connick?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Blinds.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me okay, or just ask
Yes,
me
I
to?
can.
Okay, great. Ask me to repeat if you can't. As you just testified, you assisted with Hyden-Leslie's application. Could you describe their current financial condition?
No, I'm probably not qualified to do that. I haven't reviewed their current financial situation.
Okay, could you describe their current rate design?
The rate design that is in effect now, before this rate case moves forward, is a declining block rate schedule with a residential rate schedule and a commercial rate schedule.
Okay, and you performed a cost of service study and developed a single rate structure for all customers in Hyden-Leslie, Hyden-Leslie district, and you provided 4 alternatives to the board. I don't know where to look, I'm gonna have to say. Can you? I don't know.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. So could you explain why a single rate structure is more equitable for Hyden-Leslie's customers than the present rate design?
Well, I think it is in this case because they don't have any real large commercial customers. And with a declining block rate schedule, some of the larger customers do get a benefit of lower demand factors and so forth, and really no need for dual structures.
Okay, and the alternatives that you presented had fewer declining rate blocks. Can you explain why fewer rate blocks is appropriate as well?
Well, I actually gave the district 4 or 5 different rate designs for their consideration, and one of them was a 5-block rate structure. The district elected to go with an across-the-board percentage increase, and all that's been provided in the responses to the request for information.
Okay.
But I mentioned the 5-block rate structure because that's what the staff recommended in the staff report also.
Okay. The application proposes a phased-in approach to increase the rates. Do you have an opinion on whether that's appropriate for Hyden-Leslie?
Yes, I think it is appropriate.
And you feel like receiving less revenue in the first year, they can still meet their needs and justify the phased-in?
Yes, they can. They're just not able to recover 100% of their depreciation expense at that point, but they do pay for all their expenses and actually are able to accumulate a little bit of the depreciation expense.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Valines. I have no further questions.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just a couple. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Valines?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so did you hear the questions I had for Mr. Turner earlier about the use of non-recurring charges?
Yes.
And did you understand the questions that Mr. Turner and I were talking about, how if otherwise fixed costs or costs that are going to be incurred by the utility are included in non-recurring charges, then the ability to recover those expenses is dependent on meeting a test year, a test year that in actuality the number of those events would have to be equal to the test year number, that you'd have to have so many disconnects or reconnects in accordance with what was expected in the test year in order to recover in revenue those fixed costs that are included in non-recurring charges?
I think I understand what you're saying, yes.
Okay. Have you in the past, I know Mr. Pennell did Schedule Q, I think in this one, or Attachment Q, whatever it is. In the past, have you ever calculated non-recurring charges before?
Yes, I have.
All right. And do you include fixed costs in the calculation of non-recurring charges, like an allocation of fixed costs like labor in the calculation of labor expense for service calls? Or do you just include the marginal costs, like the different, like the time it takes to roll a truck and the expense it takes to roll a truck out?
Well, the past when I've done it, for example, with equipment, you have an equipment rate that's computed, which may include depreciation and other fixed costs. So I guess I would have to say, yes, I did include fixed costs.
And in the event that you don't include fixed costs in a non-recurring calculation, as long as those fixed costs are reflected in ordinary revenues rather than other revenues, the utility in general should be, all things equal, it should be held harmless, right?
What do you mean by held harmless?
Yeah. So would you agree that other revenue, the test year other revenues is included in the revenue requirement in a case like this?
Yes.
And those reflect, X number of non-recurring charges for the test year for however many of them occurred during the test year, right?
Right.
And so, for instance, if you wanted to, I'm just making up a number, say a non-recurring charge in the test year, you incurred 50 of them, and you wanted to reduce, going forward, that non-recurring charge amount by half. Say it's a $50 charge now and you want it to be $25. You would agree that in calculating the revenue requirement, you would need to make up that amount if you wanted to reflect what the actual other revenues are going to be. You're going to have to reflect that loss of revenue somewhere else, right? It's going to have to be recovered from something else, usually the volumetric or customer charge, right?
Right.
Okay. I wanted to ask, did you conduct a cost of service study for Hyden-Leslie?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if Hyden-Leslie has conducted a cost of service? And when we talk about they've had 023 cases in lieu of ARPs. Do you know from your time working on this case, are you aware of any previous cost of service studies that the utility may have completed over the last few years?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And so in your experience, how long would you recommend that a rural water district the size of Hyden-Leslie, how often would you recommend that they conduct a cost of service study?
I've recommended to other utilities I've worked with to take a look at your finances every 2 years, and then just be aware of changes going on in your system, and possibly apply when the time is right to do that. I would say 3 to 5 years is a good range.
Okay. And so if somebody files a rate case every 3 to 5 years, you think that a new cost of service study during for each one of those cases would be a good idea?
Well, not necessarily. I think we need to differentiate between a rate analysis and a cost of service study. To me, a rate analysis would be just taking a look at, are you recovering your costs? And are the costs being recovered from those customers who caused the cost? On the other hand, a cost of service study would go in and try to apply those costs to each customer class. And it's a little more involved.
So your recommendation would be rate analyses every 2 years, maybe rate cases every 3 to 5, and then cost of service studies when there are material changes in usage per class or the number of individuals per class to maybe change the way costs are recovered from individual customers. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but you know, the same thing doesn't apply to all utilities. Some utilities are very fortunate to have a lot of growth on their system. That growth provides revenue that results in them not needing to have a rate study or a rate increase at a 3 to 5 year interval. But if growth is pretty stagnant, I think that would be the case.
Okay. And can you just explain to me, and excuse my ignorance, the calculation of the minimum bill, or what's the purpose? What is it supposed to reflect, as reflected in Hyden-Leslie's proposed rates?
Well, the minimum bill includes customer costs, and depending on what the utility wants to do, should include some usage amount. A lot of rate designs don't include any usage at all, but should include customer costs at least, and some portion of the general administrative costs.
All right. So if you, and that's sort of the idea of the fixed costs, the allocated fixed costs to serve customers, right? Regardless of usage.
Right.
And those are the costs that don't vary with demand or volume, right?
Right.
And so what about the determination of the minimum amount of usage to include in the minimum bill, in addition to the customer costs? Who makes that determination, and what's it based on?
Well, it's pretty subjective, I would say. It depends on what the community can accept. A lot of people wouldn't want to pay a bill and not have any service. But on the other hand, if you have zero consumption in your minimum bill, then those folks who use a very small amount of water are getting a fair rate, really. If you use 250 gallons a month, you only pay for 250 instead of maybe 1,000 or 2,000 gallons, which are more typical in the minimum bill.
Do you think that it's a function of the fact that, at least historically, most water meters were read to the nearest 1,000?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it your expectation that I guess, what is your experience with what decimal point most of the utilities for their billing analysis read to for customer meters?
Most meters read down to 10 gallons.
But the most, so that's my understanding as well. My question, I guess, really is, are most utilities billing down to the 10 gallons, or are they reading to the nearest, rounding down to the nearest thousands or hundreds?
I think at least 100 gallons.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Vlines, you're familiar with the fact that I guess, staff recommended a per meter, $1.53 per meter surcharge for a period of 48 months for use in reduction of water loss and other improvements in the district?
Yes, sir.
Are you comfortable with that? Are you in favor of that?
Yes, sir. I think that's a great thing that the staff recommended. The utilities incur those expenses, whether they're allowed in the rate base or not. So they do have that cost, and if the commission's purpose is to provide adequate revenue to the districts, then it seems to me that they shouldn't be penalized. And allowing that money to be used for water loss reduction, I think is the perfect purpose for it.
Well, of course, the problem has been, over the years, the regulation has basically excluded from rates water loss in excess of 15%. And obviously, that was a good goal or a good policy objective, but it turns out that all that does in the end, if you have serious water loss problems, you continue to be penalized, and you have no way of basically fixing the system. There isn't enough money to go around. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir. I think you're right.
So what the commission is trying to do, in cases where people don't ask for water loss, don't ask for the amount above 15%, but have a serious problem, as we considered Leslie County to have, was to basically give them the money, but put it in a surcharge account where it had to be used for a specific purpose of reducing water loss or used for other infrastructure purposes as permitted by the Public Service Commission. Is that a good policy on the part of the commission, in your opinion?
Yes, sir. I think it's a very good policy.
For whatever reason, in this case, you've been to Leslie County, correct? You've been.
No, I don't think I have.
You've never been to Hyden or Leslie County? It's a small county, like the one I'm from in eastern Kentucky, but they don't have a lot of growth and haven't had growth, probably as a result of the loss of coal jobs, probably suffering reduction in employment and in population. The reason I say that is you discussed some districts don't need to come in every 3 to 5 years maybe for a rate increase where they have a substantial amount of growth, which basically takes care of their need for revenue, correct? Like Bowling Green, where you work. Bowling Green's a fast-growing area. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Warren County?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But in Leslie County, Hyden-Leslie County's case, we don't have any evidence that they've come in to the Public Service Commission for a rate case since 1978, or 42 years. And that seemed like a long time to us. And they apparently have been using these rural development loan 278-023 cases to rely on their financing, but they haven't had one of those in 10 years. I suspect after reviewing their financial position, you'd probably recommend coming to the Public Service Commission for periodic rate increases every 3 to 5 years, based on what you've seen on it. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir. I would. And I would go a little further, too. The 023 statute, I think, has been a useful statute in some cases, but it does leave out depreciation expense when you go through the RD methods for the rate design or the rate calculations. So if that's the only thing the utility is relying on, they're not getting full recovery of all their expenses.
Which the depreciation factor would be what the utility would usually use for infrastructure replacement as it began to wear out and need replacement. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And those of us at Kentucky Rural Water are encouraging utilities to use the ARF statute to, or the regulation to make these applications to the PSC at this point.
I have no further questions. Mr. Butcher? anything?
I have none, Your Honor.
I have no further questions.
Vice Chairman Chandler, any questions? Any other questions?
I do not. Thank you, Chairman.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Valines. You may be excused and you may log off if you choose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is that your last witness?
Yes, sir,
Mr.
it is.
Butcher? Ms. Coney, would you like to call a witness?
Yes. We'd like to call Dwight Lewis.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Ms. Coney, you may ask.
Thank you. Jerry, I didn't ask before, but is this a situation where you want to?
No,
you
that's,
just- okay.
it's staff's witness.
Okay.
Certainly you can do the honors.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Mr. Lewis.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for being here today. Could you state your full name and address for the record?
Okay, Dwight David Lewis, 10730 Cutchin Road, Eunice, Kentucky, 41777.
And what is your job title with Hyden-Leslie Water District?
Just Commissioner,
When were you appointed?
May or June of this year.
Had you served previously on the Hyden-Leslie Water District?
Yes, years ago, yeah.
Do you know when that was?
Probably 10 or 12 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Are you related to Judge Executive Lewis?
Pardon?
Are you related to Judge Executive Lewis?
No, no ma'am.
Do you know why you were appointed? Did the Judge Executive discuss with you?
He called and asked if I'd be interested in serving on the board. That I was, where I previously was a commissioner, and I told him I would.
Do you know why Mr. Roberts was not reappointed? Or did he discuss
No.
that with you?
No, I do not.
Okay. So 10 to 12 years ago, I'm gonna have to
Yes.
do that. So you think about 2008, 2000?
Probably. I know I was commissioner when our new plant was constructed.
When the new plant was constructed, okay. Can I ask you, do you recall, were you a part of the board when they were considering the Phase 2 project, the 2013-14
No.
project?
No.
You don't recall,
I don't
or?
recall. I mean, I don't recall. It's been too long.
Okay. Do you know what your job duties entail as a commissioner?
I just, well, approve, I guess, on monthly meetings, we go in and LJ presents us with his agenda. They give us an update on the projects, and we look at their finance on claims about, approving those. I haven't been to the training yet, so.
Okay.
Because of the COVID.
Okay, I understand. So, and by the way, we offer that online, just for your information. It's coming up Tuesday, I think, is the next training session.
Wait, you're a new commissioner, correct? He's got to come here. It's not available for.
Oh, okay. So, sorry about that. Okay. Well, I didn't know if you had attended previously when you served previously. No? Okay. All right. So, how long did you serve previously? How long?
Before, probably maybe 6 to 8 years. I'm not quite sure.
Uh-huh. And did you hold any office on the board, or were?
I was a treasurer.
Okay. Okay, and you don't recall any of the project to get water to 300 customers? That doesn't ring a bell?
No.
Okay. So, let's see, Judge Lewis, I believe, testified that he had previously been in the fiscal court years ago and things like that. Did you work with Judge Lewis when you were on the board previously, or how do you know Judge Lewis?
I just know, I mean, small county, I know it, you know, I know his brother because he's an attorney.
Okay.
Just kind of know him by acquaintance, I guess.
Okay. And so when Judge Lewis asked you to serve, he didn't say anything that he was hoping to happen when you served or anything like that?
Well, no, I guess, well, the only thing he would like for the water district to, I guess, have a balanced budget.
Balanced budget.
So that was about the only thing he said.
Okay. So you know why we're here today, or have you reviewed anything? Because I know you're brand new, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes or no, or do you know what the issues are today?
Yeah, but the rate increase.
Okay. So did you, when you served previously, did you discuss the need for a rate increase?
It was mentioned, but other than that, there's no action there was taken.
Okay, we had testimony in the February hearing that there were indications that they needed a rate increase as early as 2002. So that's why I ask. I think the time that you were serving, if you're correct, they would have needed a rate case at that point too. And part of it, and part of the testimony in that hearing was that the 2013-14 Phase 2 project that they had planned to have financing for, and then it didn't work the way they wanted, so they had to seek a loan elsewhere, that was part of the problem. Do you have any recollection of that?
No.
Okay. All right. So it was discussed, the rate case, or the need for a rate case was discussed. Did you ever discuss a base rate case versus filing an 023 as part of a project?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay. Were you a part of a project at all when you served previously, like a construction project or a CPCN filing for the PSC?
No.
You were not. Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Vice Chairman Chandler?
I know you're fairly new. I just was curious if you've had any, if you've attended any of the meetings yet. How many of the meetings have you attended, I guess is the fair question.
How many meetings have I been to?
That's right.
4, 5. I'd say 5.
Okay. And at any of those meetings, I assume all those meetings will take place, or at least the majority of them, during the time frame that you all have had this case pending. Have you all had any of the members of the public, make comments at or send comments to the board that have been read or explained during that meeting?
I'm sorry, I
About
don't
this case.
understand.
You may have to repeat it. Mr. Lewis has trouble hearing it.
Yeah. At the board meetings that you all have any members of the public either shown up or send letters concerning this case?
No, sir.
Okay. And so nobody, have you received any communication, or has anybody expressed to you any concern about the magnitude of the requested increase?
I've just, a few people in the community have asked me about it, but other than that, I haven't spoken to anyone else.
And regarding is the concern you've heard, or the concern that you have, the reason that you all are looking for the phased-in approach?
Sorry to understand.
Well, let me ask it this way. Do you have a concern? Why do you think it's best to have a phased-in approach for the new rates?
Oh, phased-in approach? Well, because our community, with all the loss of our coal jobs, people are having a hard time making ends meet, And if you gradually phase in a raise, then they can better prepare to their budget to pay those bills. Because if you, I feel that if you just dump it all at one time, then you're gonna cause more hardship on the people that's already struggling.
So as a board, understanding the fact that, you know, I think we've talked about today, some sort of incremental or not even incremental, but some sort of occasional rate increase is certainly better than a lump sum increase, right?
Yeah.
What processes, has the board talked about undertaking any processes to ensure that rates are adequate on a going forward basis, every year, every other year, every 6 months, whatever it may be? Have you all talked about anything to talk about how to ensure incremental increases and not big increases like this one that's proposed?
No, unless they talked to about before I became a commissioner.
Well, let me ask you this way. Is the board going to do anything different in terms of rate sufficiency going forward than they've done in the past?
I feel so because with all the reports that we receive at our monthly meetings, with all the water loss report and financial report, that we can have a better understanding of our financial needs as a board, so that we can stay afloat on debt.
Yeah, I guess my question is what? Yeah, sorry. Between knowing and doing is kind of my question. Between knowing that you're in a problem and then doing something about it, I just was curious if y'all have undertaken any conversations related to, you know, hey, this is the lowest we're going to take. This is as low as we're going to go in terms of our margins, right? Once we hit this margin, we're gonna pick up the phone and call rural water to ask them to do one of these. You know, ask them for us to do an ARP. Have you all talked about anything like that in terms of setting benchmarks to take action going forward? Anything more than just receiving the information from Mr. Turner?
Not of my knowledge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Lewis, at any time now or previously when you were on the board 6 to 8 years, served as treasurer, was there ever any consideration or discussion among board members about that your plant, your pumps, your pipes, transmission lines, distribution lines had a certain useful life, and as they approach the end of that useful life, they need to be replaced? Was there ever any discussion about that, or how that replacement would be funded?
I don't recollect anything.
Well, what are you employed? Are you retired? Or
Retired.
what from what, sir?
Educator, as a
Okay.
principal at the Area Vocational School.
Okay,
And elementary.
as well as was that part of the county school system?
State operated.
State operated. So were you responsible for a budget?
Yes, sir.
Or anything? Well, I mean, you'd understand the need to say, I've got some old air conditioners or some old whatever, and at some point in time, I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to get the money to replace those things, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't know if that was ever done with the water district, but it led to the problems that basically it leads to a problem. At some point then, you've got to have millions and millions of dollars to replace it, and there's no money there to do it with. You know? So then you have to come with your hand out to the state and say, or the federal government and say, help me, when normally in rates given by the Public Service Commission, there's a big part of it that's there for the sole purpose, or the mostly purpose, you can use it for some other things, but basically to replace infrastructure so you have an ongoing system and it's not supposed to fail, like a Martin County. I'm sure you've probably heard of Martin County system.
Yeah.
Where, like Mr. Turner testified, where you have 3 or 4 leaks and you just apply a clamp or fix the hole. I mean, that's all they did, and now someone has suggested their engineering group now that it's going to take $50 million. They don't have $50 million, and neither does the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So the customers got a good deal for 25 or 30 years, and now they got a bad deal because the water isn't fit to drink sometimes, or they don't always get it. So in any event, I don't want to preach too much at you, but I just ask that you consider the fact that old systems, old equipment wears out and it's got to be replaced, and we need to think about how we can do that for the benefit of the ratepayers who don't always, getting the lowest rate in the state isn't always the best deal. Because when this rate increase goes through, Hyden-Leslie will have the 2nd or 3rd highest rate in the state of Kentucky. And there's nothing you can do about it, but once you get it fixed, if Mr. Turner, you know, it's possible rates can go down at some point or not go up much, but you have to be pretty vigilant about running your system properly, just like keeping your car serviced and keeping the oil changed.
Well, that's true, but, you know, as commissioners, you're based your decisions or vote on what you presented. If you're not presenting the whole truth or the clear picture, then you're in the black. I mean, you're not able to make the best decision. And that's, in my field, that's what happened.
Well, I'd agree with you because for some time, I practiced law in Paintsville, Kentucky, and I was on the member of the Paintsville Utility Commission for 3 years, and I was a bad commissioner because I'd show up and I'd read the things, you know, the little material you got before the meeting, but I didn't spend enough time asking questions or learning about or thinking about the fact that things wear out, and you've got to figure out some way to fix it, and you have to keep the general manager honest, even if you go to church with him every Sunday, because you never really know. We had those issues a few times. So I know I always told people I was a bad commissioner, and I think I was. I certainly wasn't. I was not nearly as good as I should have been. But I know better now. I'm like Paul on the road to Damascus. You know, I suddenly heard the lightning, heard the thunder. But all I'd say to all of you people is, you know, you deserve good water, and you deserve the best in life, and you deserve something beyond coal. But if you can't have decent water at a reasonable price, nobody's going to come to live.
Well, no, and if Eastern Kentucky had got the coal service money that they should have received years back, we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any further questions. Anybody else? May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you may step down, sir. Thank you. Let's see if Susie is still here. Here she is. These next few witnesses, Susie, ought to go real quickly, so.
You're okay. I was out there and I didn't hear what you said.
Yes,
We'd like to call Augustus Roberts next. please.
Mr. Roberts? Rogers, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Counsel, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi. Thank you for being here today. Okay. As I understand it, you're the former chairman of the commissioners on, of the board at Hyden-Leslie Water District. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct? Okay.
Correct.
And can you explain when your term ended?
When my term was supposed to be ended,
Okay.
What?
Please just tell us what happened with your term, because the last hearing, you heard Judge Executive Lewis say only Jesus knew when the terms were up. And
but looking back at some of the paperwork that I was discussing with LJ, what he had, my term was supposed to expire in July. And I think I'm correct in this. And the paperwork that the judge's office had, I think that was in May. I don't know how that came about, and I didn't question it, so.
Okay, and let me just step back, and I apologize to the court reporter. Could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Augustus Roberts, 1096 Fallon School Road, East Bernstead, Kentucky, 40729.
Thank you. Okay, so you didn't question, how were you informed that the judge executive felt like your term was up in May?
I just got a letter from the judge's office. And I don't have it with me. I can't even remember what it said. I was relieved of my duty.
Oh, okay. So, did it say anything else? Did the letter say anything else?
I don't think it, I don't know if I even still got it. I'd have to look and see. It's
Can
just
you-
that my services was no longer needed. I can't remember exactly how it was worded. But
Okay, Judge Lewis testified at the hearing in February that when the current board's term was up, he would discuss whether that board member had done a good job, or whether they felt like they had done a good job, and let them plead their case and then make a decision from there. Did that occur?
no,
Okay. So, how did you feel about that?
I didn't like it. I'd like to, since I seem to be the one that got the water board in such a mess, I'd like to be part of the solution, try to help it out. But that didn't work out.
Okay, so, but you didn't voice your complaint to Mr. Lewis or
No.
anyone else? You just accepted it? Okay.
No.
And at the last hearing, you made a statement that you wanted to take responsibility for the decision for the 2013-2014 Phase 2 project, and the commissioners accepted your statement. It was admirable, and so I understand you feeling responsible for that, but there was a lot of discussion as to that was the reason that you're in this situation. Can you speak to that? Do you feel like that was the only reason, or do you see other practices that needed to change as far as like applying for the rate cases and which kind of rate case, and or depending on the 023 rate increases? Do you feel like any of those things had a part in leading you to where the financial condition that you're in?
So you want my opinion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, in my opinion, I think that was the reason I was relieved of my duties as chairman, because of what I did when I borrowed money to get, I think it was 300 customers, somewhere around there. And yeah, I think that was the reason I was relieved, because, and when we did that, we were supposed to went to the PSC and got a rate increase, and we didn't. And I think I explained that the last time.
Mm-hmm.
We should have.
Okay.
There's a lot of things I would like to change now when I look back.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, in the interest of the investigation case and the fact that the PSC is trying to gather information on these processes, could you explain some of those that you think, you know, you should have done differently? Because I think we discussed earlier, you know, you're not the only district that has had a financial situation like this, or has maybe made a wrong decision and then tried to change things around. So could you offer any opinion as to what you would have changed looking back?
You mean looking back what I would have done once we done that?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, looking back, we should have came to the PSC for the rate increase.
Did you know to do that? Did you feel like you had the information to be able to do that?
Not, I didn't. I should have. I know that they always like to use R&D because I guess, I don't know if it's simpler. That's just what they've always did. And I found out, you know, that's not always correct.
Okay.
You know,
So you've changed your opinion on that?
Kind of borrow money to get money. I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot of things, since I'm no longer part of the water company, there's a lot of things I'd like to change. I would like to see politics out of it. In my opinion, the PSC ought to have complete control of it. They should be the ones appointing the board members, chairman, because, you know, it's hard to do it when politics is involved in, I'll be honest with you. Because if you got projects, if you take a project that costs you $200,000, you know, and you've got it figured out, you know what to run, you know your lines, you got it all figured out. But when you got a magistrate or a judge, somebody comes along and says, well, you know, I need you to run water up here 5 miles of my old good buddy, you know, looking for a boat, that doesn't work out. I don't like it. I never did like it.
And that
I still
happened?
don't.
And did that happen, sir?
That happens. Yeah, it happens. It might be happening to every water district as far as that goes.
Okay, but you're saying it did happen while you were on the board.
Yeah, I could say that.
Okay, and do you believe that you were relieved of your duty due to politics?
In my honest opinion, yes.
Okay. Can you explain anything else as far as that goes?
Well, not really. I probably said more than what I should say, but I know the last time I was here, I didn't say a lot.
Okay, and
that
so
I
that,
probably should have.
okay, well, let's go back to that 412 hearing. What would you have changed about what you said? One thing that stood out to me in particular was when there was the split on the board, that 3 commissioners left, and then you and Mr. Horton stayed.
Yes.
Okay, is there any more that you can tell us about that situation?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I told you this before, but that was the reason I was put in as chairman, to get city water to these people. Now, when it comes to boats, I have no idea. That didn't involve me. I didn't do it for political reasons. You know, because as long as I've been on board when Dwight was, you know, years ago. You know, these people have been promised city water. I can't even remember how far back. And people had paid their water meters. And such a long time that they requested their money back. That's how long it's been. So, you know, this was something that was been ongoing for years.
I understand.
And I got put in as chairman to get these people city water, that's what I did. I admit that.
Okay, I understand that. The testimony at the 412 hearing also was that that the district had been seeking other funding opportunities, and basically the general statement was that they had done that too long before seeking a rate case. Do you think there was anything or any type of policy or any change that could be put in place to kind of steer a district to say, you know, don't wait too long, or how long to do it as far as like the frequency of the rate case? And we've talked about putting the requirement to file every 3 years or so, but is there anything else that you would say on that matter?
Well, looking back, that would have been something that the PSC would have been great if you'd have done 15 years ago or longer, had it set up to where you had 3 or 4 years. 3 years would be a good, to me, that would be perfect.
Do you think it would take the politics out of it to an extent?
The only way you're gonna take the politics out of it, and I'm not really saying that that's gonna take it out, is for the PSC have full control of it. You point the commissioners, you point the chairman. That's about the only way you can, and that's not saying that's still gonna take it all out. You might have a good friend on the board down there, you need to do, I'm just saying,
I understand.
that's just how it is.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, just so that we have a full picture of, you served a long time as a water commissioner, and you were part of the board when they filed the resolution to file the rate case. So you were part of the solution, right? To an extent. You've been part of 1941, so you know the policies that the commission has recommended. Is there anything else you would add, or anything that you would say doesn't work or is not going to work?
Well, not really, not that. Right at the moment, I really can't think of them. I'm sure if I was going back there and sitting down, I'd come up with quite a few, but when I get up here, things change quite a bit.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, Mr. Roberts. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Chandler?
Yeah, Mr. Roberts, can you hear me?
Yes,
I guess I would ask, how many years were you on the board?
how many years I was on the board?
Yeah.
I don't know, I thought about that before, I can't really remember when I started. I keep thinking it was 2007, and I'm not sure about that.
Okay, but more than 10 years, you think?
Yes.
Okay, so more than 10 years. Can you talk to me about what a meeting would entail on average over those 10 years? What a board meeting was like?
What a board meeting was like? Well, it's going what time frame that fell into, if it was during the time that we built the plant, it was always discussing whatever's going on with that. A regular meeting, discuss our finances, which is the biggest thing, I guess. I'm having a hard time remembering all this stuff right now.
Yeah, but I mean, just on average, I mean, did approve the minutes from the last meeting, approve the bills, have it, have a presentation by the manager, have a presentation by the office folks, having a discussion with the attorney. I'm just curious, as a general matter, what the meetings were like, what they consisted of.
Well, that's basically it. Sometimes we had people from the community that would show up, and most of the time that was, they were requesting water or places that we had told them that we was going to get water, and they would be coming back and asking, time frames and sometimes it may be infrastructure, we got problems with this or that we need to take care of, so.
Let me ask this, ignoring the plant, right, because you got the new plant approximately, 10 years ago maybe, ignoring the plant, how many discussions did you all have with management as a board, or hear from management, on proactive items rather than reactive items, right? How often was infrastructure talked about looking forward rather than there's a current problem?
Actually, the infrastructure was talked about quite often, almost about every meeting, if we had something that we need to improve with, because we had a lot of old lines that needed replaced, things like that, pumps. So it was discussed about every meeting.
And did you feel like those conversations on infrastructure were how do I say this, one-off items, or were they holistic, long-term plans regarding the entirety of the system?
Sometimes they were, I guess you would say, long term. Sometimes, you know, these are things that we need to do pretty soon.
And then regarding the sufficiency of the rates, how often were not just revenues and expenses discussed, but how often were the actual sufficiency of the rates brought up or discussed?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, so let me say this. Yeah, so let's just talk, right? So you can go back and look at the utilities annual reports for the last few years, right? And the utility was losing money on a cash basis, right? And was able to pay their bills. You can just tell by the level of accounts by removing money out of cash accounts, right? Reducing cash balances. Okay. Not only was the utility not covering depreciation expense, it was actually losing money on a cash basis, right? So it wasn't a situation where Hyden-Leslie couldn't pay their vendors, right? That when you all approved bills, they didn't get paid. The rates were not high enough. They were not sufficient, right? So I'm just curious, over your time on the board, how often it was discussed, pre Mr. Turner, however, over the last 10, 12, 13 years, whether the rates were sufficient to have enough revenues to cover the expenses without having to dip into savings.
Well, I don't know if I can really answer that. Before this last project.
I mean, when you say you can't, I mean, are you saying you don't recall a time when that conversation occurred, or you just don't remember how many times?
Well, a lot of it I don't recall. I mean, I'll just be honest with you about that.
Okay, that's fair enough. And the level of accounts, did you all see an accounting each month, or did you? I mean, I assume you signed the annual reports, but that's about that's dozens of pages. Did you all get printed off reports of the accounting of how much is in the accounts, how much the expenses are, the monthly revenues, the sales? Did you all get annual report packets or monthly report packets with that kind of information?
We had one of those every meeting. The amount that we had and what we spent it on everything. Yeah, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm asking. Did you get a monthly income statement? Did you get that each month?
We had one every meeting. Yeah.
Okay. And did you all go over that, or you were just given it?
Did what now?
Was it just given to you, or did the manager present it and talk about it?
The manager presented it and we talked about it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. That's all I have. Oh, actually, can I ask one last question? Mr. Roberts, you were there for 10 years. How many times did the board seriously discuss merger or consolidation with other water utilities?
I think I've only heard that mentioned once. And don't really recall much about it. I did hear somebody mention that one time.
Do you know who it was that it was mentioned regarding?
I do not.
Okay.
I just remember that being mentioned. That's about all I.
And well, I guess really the last question. That chairman always says, "Don't trust an attorney." He says, "Last question." But I'll try to make this my last one, Mr. Roberts. Hyden-Leslie has 3,700 customers, right? 12 staff. 12 staff. Do you think that from your time on the board and your understanding of the utility, do you think that Hyden-Leslie is of the size that it can survive moving forward with that few of customers or that many customers?
If we can do what now?
Can Hyden-Leslie survive?
It's hard to hear all of. I have to admit that.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll take the time.
Hard to hear it anyway.
Can Hyden-Leslie survive as a utility with less than 4,000 customers in your experience, in your opinion?
They should be able to if we get the rate. Well, I keep saying if we, I'm not part of we anymore. If I get the rate increase, I'm sure they can, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
You're welcome.
Dr. Matthews, questions?
One, want to apologize for stepping away, and I will go back and watch. Forgive me if this has been answered, but when you were having your meetings and you were talking about infrastructure, were those issues brought up by your management or by your outside engineer?
No, most of those brought up by the manager.
Okay, so they were somebody on XYZ road says there's a leak or says they don't have sufficient water pressure. Those kinds of questions, those kinds of discussions?
Those were brought up by the manager, yes. I think, is that what you're asking?
That's what I meant, yes.
Yeah.
So your engineer didn't come and talk to you about the state of your infrastructure?
Not that I recall.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Well,
I don't have any questions. Anything else?
No, sir, no questions.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your testimony. Here she comes. May call your next witness.
Thank you. I'd like to call William Todd Horton, please.
Mr. Horton, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. I think for the benefit of the record and our other commissioners, and Mr. Roberts felt like, and I think others, that when you're inside this plexiglass, it's sort of like being in an isolation booth. So they have trouble hearing sometimes what's said by people who aren't actually here in the room. Go ahead, Ms. Coney, you may ask.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Horton.
Hello.
If you can't hear me, please just let me know. Okay. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is William Todd Horton. Address is Post Office Box 1553, Hyden, Kentucky, 41749.
Can you state your role at Hyden-Leslie Water District?
Yeah, I'm a treasurer.
Okay.
Commissioner.
How long have you been a commissioner and how long have you been treasurer?
Commissioner, I was appointed by Kenneth Witt, who was the county judge at the time. I'm thinking around 2004, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then treasurer, I was appointed treasurer, I think when Mr. Lewis stepped down.
The first time that
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis
Yes,
served?
when he left the board from the first time.
Okay. But you don't know what year that was, or?
No.
That's okay.
Not for sure.
Okay, but you did serve while Mr. Lewis was on the board as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so I think you were here for the last hearing?
Yes, ma'am.
And you heard that testimony?
Yes.
Okay, so you and Mr. Roberts are the longest-serving board members?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, right here. Okay, so any information that you can give the commission about the Phase 2 project, the 2013 project to give water to 300 customers, Do you know if Judge Lewis's testimony where he speculated about the coal severance money, do you know anything about that?
No, ma'am. I
So-
don't recall anything.
Okay. You don't recall why you had to seek alternative funding or who brought that project or?
Not with that particular project, no. I don't
Okay.
recall.
Do you agree with the sentiments that were expressed at that hearing that that project is what started Hyden-Leslie down a road to end up in this financial
Yes,
position?
that, you know, a few other things.
What would those other things be?
Well, I felt like prior to, and I don't mean to throw anyone under the bus, but prior to Mr. Turner becoming manager, we didn't get a lot of information in terms of, I didn't realize, and it's maybe because I was a bad commissioner, but I didn't realize about trainings and that type of thing. So we were a little bit ignorant
Okay.
in the fact that, you know, we just didn't know.
Well, I appreciate that, and in the spirit of like getting better and moving forward, I appreciate. I think it takes a big person to admit those things and look in hindsight to point out what you could have done better is only going to help your water district, and others can learn from that as well. So I appreciate that. Okay, do you know anything about why there was a board split and you and Mr. Roberts were allowed to stay or asked to stay, or do you know anything about that?
I recall when it happened. I don't remember the particulars, but there was a magistrate came to me and asked me if I would want to continue to remain on the board, and I told him that I would, and then I was reappointed. So, but other than that, I can't speculate, or it would be speculation.
Okay, was that Mr. Sizemore?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
Did Mr. Sizemore have any other involvement with the water board?
He was in a couple meetings, but I don't recall, he wasn't there often, and just basically there for information, what I recall.
And Mr. Lewis replaced Mr. Sizemore, or I'm sorry, Judge Lewis replaced him as a judge?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do you know anything about why the terms that you filed for the past year changed when Mr. Roberts was informed that his term had ended? You filed in your annual report that yours and his ended July 25th, 20 for the past couple of years. And then you heard Mr. Roberts testify that he was informed that his term was up. Do you know anything about that, or was that discussed as at a board meeting about your term limits?
I don't recall any term limit discussion. I do know that they're staggered, but how they're staggered, I'm not for sure.
Has Judge Lewis come to any of your board meetings?
No.
As far as the 1941 investigation, have you as a board discussed that investigation and discussed the order and then the final report that was filed? Did you review or did you have a part in preparing any of that?
Yes, ma'am. We talked about it at every board meeting,
Okay.
and it was discussed, and the items that had to be presented, but yes, we were well informed.
Okay. And as I asked Mr. Turner about the rate analysis and putting that into a policy, and he had talked about that, that was included as some of the general recommendations and the general orders in the main order. But those types of things, those policies, does he come to you and say we should do this policy, or do you as a board look at the order and say we need to change this policy? And
He comes to us and says, you know, we need to maybe put this policy in place, or this one, or we need to reevaluate our bylaws and things like that.
okay.
He mentioned that on occasion, yes.
Okay, so on the items such as like the water loss prevention and leak detection policy, did the board, adopt that and put
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes, we adopted that, and we talk about it at every meeting, and usually there's two different ways. He has two different forms in there, or charts for us to look at, and, to look at and analyze them.
Okay,
And we are very proud to say that, it has come down dramatically in a year without any, just things that him and his staff are doing. So I think we're on the right track.
that's great. Okay. Is there anything else that you think has improved since the 1941 hearing, or as in the process of all of these hearings?
Well, I remember when we hired Mr. Turner, and I'm not just trying to toot his whistle or blow smoke, but when Mr. Roberts and I discussed about things that needed to change, in that he needed to get some things to work with, for example, tools and things like that. So we felt like things were not where they needed to be, but with Mr. Turner that we could get him going in the right direction. And it's starting, I feel like it's starting to go in that direction. We felt like we may, be in the red a little bit, but when he got policies in place and things to work with, then it would start turning around. And I do believe that it is starting to do that. And I feel like he was on the right track, but then this the case you're referring to came about, and it sort of just coincided with it.
Okay. So the part of the investigation that discussed capable managers and skilled managers with resources and things, you would agree with that recommendation that you have to have the right management in place?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay. Have you attended commissioner training?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But I had not prior to Mr. Turner being there.
Okay, that's right. I'm sorry, you did mention that. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Have you heard some of the questions that I've asked of the other folks here today, Mr. Lewis and
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, sir.
So I guess I would ask to the question I asked Mr. Lewis, from everything you've learned during the pendency of this case and then the 41 case, the 412 case, is there any interest on your part in creating processes whereby the board requires rate reviews every so often, or has thresholds where they require that they automatically that you all automatically look at increasing rates, such as a minimum amount of margin or some other metric?
I don't recall any metric being discussed in terms of what to look at, but we have talked about. I'm not for sure if it was a resolution or a policy passed about having looking at the rates every 3 to 5 years. Yes.
Well, so how many years have you been on the board?
Probably since 2004.
All right. So, and you heard Mr. Roberts. You agree you've been getting financial information and board packets this whole time?
Yes.
The board has. And so, what's different now, or what can the commission expect is different moving forward if the main thing that you're going to be doing to ensure rate sufficiency is just getting the same the same financial information that you all have been getting for years?
Well, I think it's discussed more. We talk about it, and I feel like it's analyzed and reviewed more, as opposed to just looking at it and just act or making a motion on it.
Well, so in the past, Mr. Roberts noted that in the past the manager would go over the financial information. Are you saying that there's more discussion on it now?
Yes.
The
Yes,
financial information?
There's a balance sheet. We look at the balance sheet based on the current year budget and the prior year budget. We look at a claims list. There's like 3 different documents that we look at to analyze the financial situation.
Okay. And when did you all start talking about that more?
Probably when Mr. Turner became general manager.
Okay. And so what do you think needs to be put into effect at the board level to move to the question I asked Mr. Lewis earlier, to move from discussing something to ensuring that actions are taken for sufficient rates?
Well, we need some way, some metric to look at the data to see if, if we're at a certain criteria that maybe we need to analyze to determine if we need a rate increase.
Okay. And so do you all know, or does Mr. Turner remind you all each case, what your margins are and what your debt service coverage or other lending requirements are? What level of margin that you require to ensure you don't default on your debt?
I would say yes, but we talk about that.
Okay. So I'll just ask, so for at least the first couple of years that Mr. Turner was there, that the board was aware that they were financially, insolvent's the wrong word, but that the revenues were insufficient?
Yes. Well, like I said earlier, we felt like when Mr. Turner was hired that we would have to go through a rough period prior to making progress and going in the right direction.
Okay. And merger, Mr. Roberts hadn't been on the board quite as long as you have, but pretty close. He mentioned that he can only remember one conversation about merger. Do you remember any conversations about merger being discussed in the context of the Hyden-Leslie Water District?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. And why well, let me just ask: do you have feelings about merger or consolidation one way or the other?
I'm a realist, and I do think that our community is in a situation where that may have to be looked at. I'm not stupid, so to speak, to think that we can make it on our own, because we are losing population quite often, and I'm sure that would have to be considered.
Well, I asked, staff has recommended to report something like a 66% increase just to have sufficient rates in their estimation. Mm-hmm. And as discussed earlier, either their report or their report plus the Hyden-Leslie Water District request the additional $50,000 plus the additional $9,000 to reflect, I think, the vacation pay and the 12th employee would put you all close to or at the second most expensive average water bill in the state of Kentucky. Do you think it's high time you start talking about it? I mean, I hate to ask the question that way, but would you agree that the discussion at least needs to happen for the sake of customers?
Yes, I would entertain the idea that the discussion needs to happen. Yes.
Okay. I just asked, how do you see that going? Is that something that the board needs to tell Mr. Turner to do that, or should Mr. Turner be looking for those opportunities separate and distinct from the board?
Repeat that, please.
The merger, consolidation, is that something that you think that Mr. Turner shouldn't be looking into without board direction? Or do you think that's something that Mr. Turner can be at least having discussions or looking at opportunities separate and outside of board approval, just kicking the tires?
It probably wouldn't hurt just to kick the tires.
So to do it without, I guess what I'm asking is, do you expect the board to take any position to direct Mr. Turner to do anything on that front? Or is it going to be up to Mr. Turner to bring opportunities to you all?
I'm only one member, and I can't speak for the board, but it probably will be discussed, yeah.
Okay. I appreciate you coming up here today. That's all the questions I have, Chairman.
Dr. Matthews, questions?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Mr. Horton, I guess just to follow up on Vice Chairman's comments about merger consolidation. Probably like with school districts, I don't know when, you're not near as old as I am, but in Johnson County when I was in high school, there were 5 high schools, and now there's just 2. And one of them is Paintsville Independent, which is barely hanging on. Ultimately, economies of scale matter, and we've always thought, one of the possibilities is regionalization of water with, it wouldn't mean you would have, Leslie County would have its own representatives on a larger board that basically would have more money available to pay the manager more and to have staff engineering and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, one of the One of the concepts would be a regionalization, which would probably require a statutory change. But we found out that there are other districts, one being where Mr. Lyons is from, where the Warren County is a large district that has apparently a lot of revenue through growth, and their general manager also has a contract where he manages Simpson County and Butler County water districts. Now, the boards still have control, but he just does the management function for a fee, and it's simply, then they borrow personnel as needed, equipment and that kind of thing, and account for it. Or the other would be, things like that was suggested in a management audit for Martin County Water District 20 years ago, which they absolutely refused, and that was to try to work through a project of where several water districts would coordinate and hire a full-time engineer to basically work, just do infrastructure and planning and that kind of thing. So I don't know, there are several options available, and it's, there's not much we can do about that other than we would be called on to approve it. But there are several situations, one I guess in maybe Whitley County, and some others down there in the far southeast corner, where several counties have consolidated, water districts. But so if it gets to the point where where it looks like the burden is too great, there are alternatives, and we'd stand willing to help investigate or do whatever we could if at some point you feel like that's the that's the way to go.
Well, can I say something?
Sure.
And you alluded to the school system. That wouldn't go over too well. But, that is something that I feel like we must look at. We have schools in our district. And I know we're not here talking about schools, but that does happen, unfortunately. And
Yeah, school, that's never been popular either.
no, it's not, and nor would the water district, I don't think, would be popular. But, again, just because you look at the menu don't mean you may purchase at that particular restaurant, so to speak. But, I think it needs to be looked at.
Well, I think that's right. Other than, we've had discussions with several. In fact, we have 2 water districts in western Kentucky in Davis County that have asked to merge, and we're considering that. But almost in every other instance where there's been possibly a county and a city, there's a lot of distrust, or it's like in school districts, I'm out in so-and-so, I'm in Bledsoe, and I don't like the people in Hyden, or I don't trust, that's a different crowd.
Right.
So I understand. That's always the way it is, and it makes it difficult. And usually people find out it's not quite as bad as they think. But you never convince them of that beforehand.
No.
Anything else of Mr. Horton?
No questions, Your Honor.
May Mr. Horton be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. You may be excused. You have another witness?
We do. We have 2 more witnesses. Mr. Helton, we'd like to call Mr. Helton next, but I need to get Susie first.
Mr. Maggott, I hope you're getting paid by the hour. Or whatever you're getting an appropriate, I don't know if you can charge this as a rate case expense or not. Okay, Mr. Helton, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated. Ms. Koenig, you may ask.
Hi, Mr. Helton.
How you doing?
I'm okay. If you can't hear me, please let me know, okay?
All right.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Timothy Darrell Hilton, 75 Deerfield Road, Hilton, Kentucky, 48440.
So you live in the town that has your last name?
Right. Between Hyden and Bledsoe.
Okay.
I've driven that road many times,
Oh.
going to Harlan.
Okay. Could you state your role at Hyden-Leslie Water District?
I'm chairman of the board.
And how long have you been chairman?
Probably, 4 months now.
And how'd that come to be?
When Mr. Roberts was relieved of his duties, I was nominated and voted on.
Okay. Do you know why the terms changed or why Mr. Roberts' term was suddenly called?
No, I don't.
Okay. How long have you been a commissioner?
I think since about 13 or 14. in that
2013? So did you come on when the Phase 2 project was in the works, or?
Well, I think when I came on, it had already been bidded. The contractor already received the contract.
Okay. And you've been here for the testimony for 412, for 19412. So you've heard the testimony on that. And do you agree with the general sentiment that Hyden-Leslie just waited too long to file the rate case, thinking they were getting other sources of funding, or?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Can you add anything to the testimony that's already been given, or the theory that Judge Lewis had put forth as far as that project to get water to 300 people?
No, not really.
Okay. So are you fearful that you may be asked to end your term soon, or?
Well, I work every day, so, I mean, I have a busy work schedule. You know, if I do, that's fine too.
Okay.
If I'm
Where
asked.
do you work?
I own my own business. I'm a contractor, heavy equipment.
Okay. So, you've been on the board since 2013, and you've been involved in these last cases. Is there anything else that you would add as far as what the board has done to comply with 1941? Anything you'd like to say?
You know, just the only thing before 17 when LJ, you know, I don't think the board members were informed as they are now. You know, it may be me. It may have just went over my head. You know, I don't know. But that's the way I feel. You know, we hadn't had any training. Didn't know we were supposed to, so.
And have you attended training?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
I have no questions, Chairman, thanks.
Dr. Matthews?
I have no questions.
Getting off easy.
I have no questions. May, Mr. Woucher? May Mr. Helton be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Helton. May be excused.
And next, we'd like to call Mr. Maggard.
Well, we better wait for Ms. Stratton to come
Right.
and sanitize the witness stand.
Everybody else did the heavy lifting. You get to.
Okay, Mr. Maggard, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated. Ms. Koenig, you may ask.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Maggard.
Good afternoon.
So you've been here the whole day. Thank you for waiting. And you were at the February 19, 412 hearing as well.
Yes.
And just to follow up on that testimony that you gave then, Have you changed anything about your policies as far as how you advise your clients based on the recommendations from 1941 or the discussion or testimony from the 19412 case?
I would say it's still project dependent or client dependent. You know, different clients would require different types of filings. So I think both alternatives would work in different cases.
Okay. In the 19412 hearing, you testified that you do help water districts with rate filings.
Yes.
And that you testified that you do a rate study when you're doing an analysis of a project.
Yes.
Looking back at that testimony, could I ask you, do you think that your definition of a rate study, the way that you state that, and after all of the testimony has come in about the PSC's analysis in a base rate case versus a 023 case, would you say that perhaps we mean something different if I say the PSC is doing a rate study versus your rate study?
No, I think they're the same, but I think what the difference, Mr. Beline said, as we know, rural development does not include depreciation in there. Rate study and investigation for a rural development project would be the same, but not to the letter as a PSC alternative rate filing. So
Okay.
you have different categories in an ARF versus a 023 case.
Okay, and I'm so sorry, but could you go back and state your name and address for the record? I apologize, we just jumped right in.
My name is Michael Keith Maggard. My business address is 220 East Reynolds Road, Suite A3, Lexington, Kentucky, 40517.
Thank you, and your role with Hyden-Leslie Water District?
Consulting engineer.
Okay, great. So you think it's the same thing except for the depreciation, but I guess what I'm getting at, so do you recall the testimony that you gave when Mr. Wutcher was questioning? You said that you've been involved in about 50-50 between traditional rate filings and rate filings through KRS 278-023.
Yes.
Would you still say that's accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Would like to ask you a couple specific things to follow up. Mr. Turner testified about the depreciation reserve accounts. You are Hyden-Leslie's point person on funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I could read the exact phrase that they put, but they're representative to federal and state funding agencies.
Yes.
Is that in every case?
Yes.
Just across the board?
Yes.
Okay. So.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, so sorry. So does that mean that you are, how are you paid? Are you paid under contract or, I think we covered this a bit. You're paid by the project, but.
Yes.
But for all time, you're like are you like a full-time engineer or?
I would, since 2000, I think I've attended 95% of their meetings, so I would say pretty close to full-time, if not.
Okay.
I'm available full-time for anything that they would require, yes.
Okay. So you're just available to them and they choose to ask you to seek funding or look at a project, things like
Yes.
that. So following up on that question about the depreciation reserve accounts, do their creditors require written reports concerning those balances?
As funding applications,
As part of the loan resolution, I think Mr. Turner testified that once they meet the reserve account level,
yes.
that's left alone, except that there are yearly reminders, or how does
Yes,
that
that's
work?
left alone, and if they choose to spend it, they would have to request to spend it from rural development.
Okay. So are those reminders sent to you as their representative, or are they sent to the district?
No, they're sent to the district.
Okay, so funding agencies, when they communicate or correspond, they correspond with the district?
Yes,
And-
as billing and, yeah, payments, yes.
Okay. Do you know what happens if a lending agency finds that the depreciation reserve account is not in compliance? Has that happened?
Course of action,
Mm-hmm.
they would contact the utility and they would have to either explain why or make means to pay that in the account.
Has that ever happened with a water district that you advise?
No,
Okay. Is Hyden-Leslie Water District in compliance with their bond ordinances?
as far as I know, yes.
And you know this stuff because you attend the board meetings and you consult with Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of fiduciary duty as far as what you advise your clients attaches in your capacity as their contract engineer? Or do you know? Do you have a fiduciary duty as an engineer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ethical and fiduciary.
Okay. And so you would say that due diligence to advise your client in any situation would be, you said you do a rate study and you look at the rate sufficiency, but you don't look at the depreciation as
If
part.
it's an RD case.
If it's okay. So you feel like you advise and you explain the options in a project?
But I will clarify that rural development doesn't include depreciation, but they do short-term, short-lived assets that would qualify as depreciation as projects that would be identified by the district that would be included in their budget as depreciation. But they're listed as short-lived assets, not depreciation.
May I ask?
Sure.
Is there anything to prohibit you or any other water district that applies for an RD loan from including additional funds of money, additional rate increases to basically provide for infrastructure replacement or regular depreciation like you would
Yeah, you
get
can
coming to
include it.
PSC?
As long as the debt coverage is covered, there's not a ceiling.
RD doesn't object to a higher rate
No.
increase than they would require.
No.
Is that right?
That's right.
That's left to the district,
That's correct.
which doesn't always want
That's
any
right.
more money.
That's correct.
Isn't that correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. In follow-up to the testimony at the 412 hearing, and you've sat here all day, so I know you've heard me ask other board members, the general sentiment was that Hyden-Leslie had waited too long to seek the rate increase. Were you advising Hyden-Leslie throughout that time period?
Yes.
So, do you agree with that sentiment? And could you speak to why they didn't seek the rate increase? Why they didn't?
It was discussed and advised, but I don't know why it wasn't.
And would you suggest anything other than what's already been put forth today about a possible regulation or, something to require them to file a rate case every 3 years or 3 to 5 years or something like that? Is there anything that you would suggest to help
No.
prevent things from turning bad and staying bad, or to prevent a district from, sticking to, seeking funding too long or whatever it may be?
I have nothing to add.
You don't? Okay. What is the status of the, so listed in the response filed on May 22nd for Hyden-Leslie that you, I'm not sure if you sponsored, but it's discussing the projects that you're helping Hyden-Leslie apply for.
Yes.
And this particular project, it's WX 21131 002 Phase 3B Water System Improvements Project. Could I ask what the status is of that project?
Yes, that's the project, it's approximately 4.6 million. 2.8 million has been funded through rural development. $1 million has been requested through community development block grant. That application is in. They're making review at this time. It also includes a $500,000 Appalachian Regional Commission grant application that is also in. And what I was told from the Department for Local Government was that they would make recommendation in the middle of November, and they hope to soon have announcements
Okay,
following shortly.
so that's the reapplication of the block grant that was discussed
Yes.
at the 412 hearing. Okay, so that wasn't lost? Or how would you describe it?
Well, it's a reapplication,
Okay, so trying again.
yes.
Okay.
It was funded once, so we have high hopes that it'll be funded again.
Okay, all right. Is there anything that you would like to comment on from the 412 hearing? The testimony after it was all said and done?
No.
Okay. So you, as the representative for the funding, there are 5 projects in WRIS right now?
Yes.
The system?
Yes.
Could you just briefly describe what those are?
I don't have that list.
This one was one, correct?
Yes, this was one.
Mhm.
There is a project to replace some asbestos line
Okay.
in there. There is a project to run water to a very sparsely populated area that may qualify for abandoned mine lands. That was called the Bry Cove section. And then we have replacement of Kentucky 80 section. So it's basically there's probably one more project that would include customers, scattered customers throughout the county. And then the other projects would be replacement of deteriorated, outdated equipment and lines.
Okay.
So-
Do you have an opinion on the surcharge that the commission suggested in their staff report?
Do I have an opinion?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it'll definitely assist the district in, identifying and fixing some problems that they have, yes.
Okay. Do you have an opinion on the recommendation in the 1941 investigation report about possibly appointing full-time engineers or having districts share engineers?
Well, I'm always for engineers having work, so.
Okay.
I would be for that.
Okay.
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Vice Chairman Chandler. It's heck of a note when we turn on each other. We just can't.
That's
do that.
exactly right.
I have no questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Dr. Matthews?
I don't either.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Butcher?
questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
You may step down, Mr. Maggard. Thank you. Do you have any other witnesses?
The commission has no further.
Mr. Butcher, anyone you'd like to
I
put
have
on
a-
rebuttal or anything?
I have a question to ask, because we have got a staff report. I take it the people that drafted the report and made their findings are not going to testify today?
Not unless you need them to. They are prepared if you,
I mean, are they here?
yes, I wasn't gonna call them though, and you didn't either, so if you would like to though, we can certainly.
Did your client accept the
We accepted
recommendations?
the findings, Your Honor, but my understanding from past practice with the commission was that when the commission has a hearing on the entire application, everything is open to review.
Well, if your client's accepted the findings of the report, what is there to review?
No, there were a couple of questions that we did want to ask to make a few points, but given the lateness of the time and the fact we have accepted it, I was just, I guess for future reference, when the commission staff requests a report, it would be incumbent on the applicant to go ahead and make a specific request to have those persons present and prepared to
I
testify.
think that probably would be best.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Mr. Wutcher, moving forward, this is me speaking, only for me. Your clients can probably expect that the commission will be doing what it can to get these troubled districts all the money we can possibly get them, whether they want it or not. And that's why, in this case, you may have seen other instances. You've seen an instance where additional questions were asked, and we've done things to try to see that the district, we can make it as whole as possible, including seeing that your fees are paid for.
Well, I won't
And I'm not,
address that
I'm not
area.
expecting you to comment on your fees, but I do think with respect to a surcharge, which it had, were it not for the regulation, the district would have gotten that money anyway, right? But for the regulation which prohibits a district from recovering the costs above a 15% water loss, you would have gotten it. And obviously, we want you to have it, but restricted to water loss efforts, right?
Yes, sir. Well, that leads to my second question, which is going back to 2019-412. The commission had denied the district's earlier request for authorization for the KIA loan. And we have introduced in this case KIA's acknowledgement that the rates recommended by the commission staff are sufficient to satisfy the condition. In order to place that matter again before the commission, would you recommend we simply make a motion asking for a decision in that case?
I think we plan on making a decision in that case. After 42 years without Hyden-Leslie being before us, we needed some leverage, perhaps. No, I think our order will include something that will address that issue with the KIA loan.
Okay. We were just concerned as to whether the commission was expecting something on our part to go ahead.
I don't think we need to hear anything from you on that. I think we will take care of that in the order.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Just if you wanted to give a date on the post-hearing data request, I believe I only have two, very short, so I could get those out quickly.
You think you could get them by, what is today, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Monday? How much time do you need?
Friday will be fine.
Friday? And then Mr. Butcher, I think we know, so I remember, I think that information ought to be fairly readily available. You just want to consult with your client and determine how much time you'll need.
I believe we can have, if we receive a response of the request on Friday, we can have them back within a week.
Okay, thank you. We'll enter an order to that effect. All right, is there anything else we need to discuss or anything else that's needed?
No, sir. Not on all.
All right, in that case, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all very much.